What black market did kids at your school run? I ran at Point for a few spare years in elementary. Books got banned in the classroom. Not blacklisted books, but literally books in general. They were far too distracting, even though most kids read when done with work. etc. Point I started smuggling books to school and peddling them out to kids. It started out innocently. I had loads of Hank the Cowdog books that I was super into, and I hid them in my desk, and I loaned them to close friends when asked. But soon, the entire class knew, and that spread to the school. I became a full-time book smuggler. I had a system where there was a 2-week borrowing limit, kept a log of who/what book/when, ran a teensy little library for myself, basically, and I made sure these kids were treating the books fairly. If anything came back damaged, they were banned from borrowing. Point kept this up until middle school, which was considerably less totalitarian. Edits. Spelling. Sorry. Mobile. Edit 2. Thank you for the silver and gold. Holy crow. I'm about to hop off, but I'm glad some people got a genuine smile out of this. It's probably the only really interesting thing I've ever done, so this made my whole day. I hope everyone has a lovely one. During elementary school in the 80s, many candies weren't individually wrapped for sale in stores. Think Warheads, etc. I bought bulk packs of candy, didn't matter what kind. Although atomic fireballs were my cash cow. Point I individually packed them, or maybe a couple to a pack depending on the candy. I use those tiny Ziplocs you see people use for drugs. Being around adults a little devoid of scruples, I was able to get those in bulk from a local head shop called High on the Hill. It was a surreal time looking back. I was the only supplier for a year solid in 4th grade. I made so much bank for a 10-year-old it was insane. I would make $100 a week just off of atomic fireballs. The bulk jugs were about $5 or $6 each wholesale, and at a quarter each it worked out to about $60 a jug profit, if I recall. Point luckily school came easy to me, because it was a full-time job keeping stock, packaging product, counting piles of change, budgeting, keeping a bank register. Mom got a separate account that I used for my money, dodging the man, etc. It was turbulent as I never really had a group of friends as a kid, but in the 4th grade I was the faking man. Point going from having no real good friends and having my time divided by either being picked on or ignored to becoming the belle of the ball was surreal. Even at that time I was able to realize what was going on. Their smiles were all fake. Their interest was not in me, but rather what was in my bag any given day. Girls were not saying hello because they were being polite or even the least bit interested in talking to me. They were just waiting their turn for their fix. That denim bag got more attention than I ever dreamed of. I was just along for the ride. I had laid the groundwork and provided the blueprint. When the 5th grade started there was competition, but they were weak. They would always sell out or only buy enough to make a few bucks here and there, largely selling lollipops or pre-packed stuff. Hershey's Kisses, Bitto Honey or Tootsie Rolls, whatever they could grab at the store before school. It was amateur hour. They had made a mockery of something I took seriously as a 10/11-year-old can take something. I closed up shop pretty quickly after the school year began. The fast life and fast money was over. The excitement wasn't there. The smiles weren't as big. Kids came to me as a last resort. They bought the popular kids completely out before looking my way. It was like flipping a switch. My first day without the bag I had a few kids ask if I was holding, but once word got around that I was out of the game everything went back to normal. No friends, no conversation, no one to sit with at lunch or on the bus, no one interested, fake or otherwise. It's the first time I had ever really witnessed the dynamic of being disingenuine. I had always been authentic, and after it was all over, I was happy to stay that way. Point I've never really recounted this time into words. As it turns out, I learned a lot of life lessons in the 4th grade. TLDR I peaked in 4th grade. I was a Pokemon card smuggler in 6th grade. My friend's dad overheard my friend and I talking about how much our Pokemon cards were worth. He was shocked to learn some were worth $10 to $20 a piece. He made the comment, shame they won't be worth that much when you go to sell them. That comment stuck with me, and a few days later I started selling my cards at school. Point I made a list of everything I had with prices next to them. I'd pass the list around during class and kids would meet up with me between classes to buy what they wanted. I was making crazy amounts of money for a middle schooler, and before long parents were complaining that their kids were skipping lunch because they were spending their lunch money on Pokemon cards, so the school banned them. But I still had a good bit of inventory to move. I did all kinds of things to avoid getting caught. I hid cards in a box of crayons. I put a few sheets of sleeves in the middle of a binder full of legit notes. I even hollowed out an old textbook to hide all my cards despite getting searched 3 to 5 times over the next few weeks. My cards were never found, and I was able to sell all of them before Christmas break. I ended up making close to $800 and was able to buy my entire immediate and extended family Christmas gifts with my own money for the first time. Once all the other kids learned how much money I had made, they were blown away and suddenly everyone was selling their cards. Problem was, no one was buying them anymore. TLDR, I started a one kid Pokemon card black market, smuggling them into school, and got out of the game right before the bubble burst. Myself and 3 other friends, all Asian, sold those Asian jelly straws, something non-Asian kids are unfamiliar with, but were in love with when discovered. Caramel apple pops and Mexican lollipops, large Latin community, and saw the opportunity to make more money, covered in tajin in middle school. Each straw was 25 cents, 5 for $1, and pops would go for 75 cents to $1 depending on the demand. We would each have a jar of the jelly straws in our own locker, a bag of pops and a small box of quarters and cash. Every period, we would restock our backpack and sell while walking to and from class, and in our class period. It was great. As a middle schooler, $20, split between 4 of us, $5 per kid, a day was the equivalent of making 6 figures now in adult life. Life was great. Until one day my friend's locker got broken into. Someone had watched over his shoulder when he put his locker combination in and came back later. They took all the snacks, all the cash, about $100 worth, and everything else in the trash. School eventually banned the jelly straws, but not the pops. Large Latin community still brought their own to eat as snacks and made students who got caught reselling snacks get suspended. My 3 friends and I were content back then. We had made roughly $2,000 from our classmates and still got to eat the Asian straws at home. Now I work 40+ hour weeks to pay rent and eat fast food. Growing up sucks. We created an entire black market currency and economy based on rocks. Story below. I used to manage one of 3 mining operations that were running concurrently on the elementary school playground back in the mid to late 90s. This school was located in a small town in southeast Tennessee, rural and bordered by the Cherokee National Forest. The shinier or smoother the rock, the more valuable it could be. Rocks were traded between kids and their peers for snacks, drinks, homework bribes, even protection from bullies. Whoever controlled the rocks controlled the playground. My operation had the largest kids using the biggest boulders that were chipped into rounded points to break up the largest rocks down to manageable size for a bunch of little kids, and we had the most hands with sticks and straight-edged rocks for digging and dirt displacement. At the end of a day of work, we would place a huge rock on top of our mining hole, too big for most anyone to lift, besides a select few guys that all worked for me. Of course, I'm sure any of the 4th, 5th, or 6th graders could have, at the time, had a cared too. 2 other operations existed. One that was made up of all girls, though their rock output was shabby at best, and another group that did their work inside of the dome-shaped jungle gym, providing the most protection from intruders and thieves, while also providing line-of-sight obstruction to the teachers and others. As a manager, I would walk the edge of the playground looking for strong sticks and perfect digging rocks, because the durability of sticks and pieces of chipped rock required a pretty steady supply of unbroken tools to work with. On the occasion that the classes had recess at different times, a lot of thievery and sabotage would happen. Rocks would get stolen, and mining holes would get filled with trash and debris. I recently visited the old school, which was closed in the mid-2000s, and is now abandoned, and has fallen into disrepair. The hole though, it's still there. All this time still hasn't fixed the impact my class and others had on that old playground. That's about all I can remember from the experience, but I do still have my own personal collection of rocks from that playground that I took home bit by bit over many years in elementary school. A box full of stupidity. and imagination. I used to be an instant noodle dealer in 5th grade. Our school would charge unbelievable amounts for their snacks and people got hungry on really late days. So I would buy like 40 packs $4 $18 and sell them for $1 each. The school had a cafeteria with water boilers, so you had everything you needed to make some. Now, why didn't others go and buy where I bought them? Well, because the amount of homework we had was outrageous. About 2 paperworks each week and an assignment of some sort. Every damn week. But to the unlucky kids, who didn't have so much cash to constantly buy noodles, they instead did parts of my homework. The school caught on pretty fast and put up posters that if anyone could catch the noodle dealer they would be rewarded. I think it was because all the paper trash from my wrappers sometimes ended up on the floor instead of in a trash can. So, knowing this, my clever young self carved out a couple books, like you see in movies. They were all from Diary of a Whimsy Kid Go Longer novels. And I would hide the pack in there and pass it saying, "Have you read past chapter 5 yet? The story gets a lot more interesting, and you do have to read this book." The teachers thought that I had a massive book pile at home and brought books for people to read, so I was among a favorite in some classes. And after they had eaten the pack the next day they'd put a $1 bill in the book and hand it back. I made such a profit from this, so it was okay if someone never paid. I'd just freeze them out, excommunicado. Okay, I've been waiting for this one point. My buddy Adam arrives at school, pulling me and Rasmus aside to tell us about a show he watched last night about some guy who traded his way to a few houses, cars and a lot of money. Apparently he just started off with a needle or some sheet. Point. We were down. The 3 of us, all 11 to 12 years old, picked up a needle from class and spent 3 whole goddamn days trading it. Nobody needed it until this guy from a grade above us got a splinter while playing soccer inside. We gave him the needle. He gave us a handful of sour cream and onion chips. Those were popular, so we actually got a full mini chocolate milk for those. On it went until someone actually traded money for some shit I forgot what was. With that money we bought bread and milk and sold it to some kids for more than it cost us. By the end of the second week, we had 50 kr. So we went to the local grocer and bought this amazing package of 1 kr candy bags, super tiny ones. They sold 90 of those for 50 kr. We faking ran back to school, and every recess we would fill our pockets with these, our pants falling down all the time with the weight, and sell to kids for their lunch money. They usually cost 1 kr a piece, so we made 40 kr in one day. Next day we did the same. And the day after that we had enough money for 180 of the small bags. I remember this is where our sales slowed. Some kids got in trouble for eating candy instead of food. Also, we had way too much product to move. Then this kid bought 20 in one deal. I will never forget you, man, and said he heard the kids in the classes in the basement was talking about us and wanted to try the goods. So we went down there. And I shit you not guys, about 60 to 70 kids at the height of my chest were faking raving all around us, yelling back quote there they are, and grabbing at us to get the good bags first. We used to sell 90 bags in a good day. That day we sold 180 bags in 15 minutes or less. This left us with 210 kr, enough to buy 4 packages. We sold those in less than a day. Then we were at 330 kr, a considerable amount of money we felt. So we bumped the business up a notch. Adam convinced his parents to drive him to Germany's border, where candy and stuff are less taxes, to buy Coca-Cola cans. We had planned out the perfect spot to sell them, behind the toilet building on the main playground at school. We would have made 150% plus profit per day, we figured. It was a matter of time before we would be rich, and we were already legends at school. Point. The next day a teacher shut us down with some bullshit reasoning about health regulations or some shit. I never stopped hating her. It is the greatest memory of an otherwise damn boring school. Rasmus, Adam and I. My time to shine. Allow me, Reddit, if you'll indulge me, to share a story of how a few kids trying to make an honest quid turned into gang warfare in my school. Point. For context, I live in the UK in one of the few areas that have grammar schools, academic schools for people that pass IQ tests at a young age. Starting our year 10th, age 14 over 15, a couple us got a wise idea. Because of food laws in the UK, schools couldn't sell any junk food. Instead you only got healthy options like these utterly loathsome cookies that tasted like baked powdered milk. So we could go to the nearby Quality Save, a shop that sold faulty or near sell by stock super cheap. A pack of cookies that usually cost £1 cost 33 pence here. A bottle of drink that was £1.50 sold for 50 pence. It quietly started with one kid in my class. We'll call him Dan. I quickly followed. Being from a poorer family and needing money, I saw an opportunity. Dan was just starting out when I followed suit. At first he didn't take too kindly to me stepping on his turf. He got some of his friends to break into my locker because he knew I couldn't snitch about selling shit in the school illegally. Eventually I struck a deal with him and pleaded to his conscience. We were both stoners from piss poor families and I needed him to know I was trying to make a buck to actually have money to buy some shit for myself, and we could cut a deal where I'd buy different products from him. He had cookies, Pepsi and certain kinds of drinks. I had biscuits, Coke and other types of crisps. He accepted on the condition he had first dibs in our class, and I accepted. Better than getting my shit grabbed. For a good year business was moving. The teachers knew someone was selling shit, but couldn't find who. Everyone who bought from us knew if they snitched they wouldn't get the junk food. And the money. Holy shit, the money. Guys, I was making more illegally selling junk food than I was earning in my first job. I was pulling in around £400-500 a week. Dan was doing anywhere between 700 to 900. Bigger locker. Ended up getting a few year 7s, entry years, to work for him. I stayed solo. Unfortunately, Dan couldn't keep his mouth shut about the money he was making, and about a quarter of the way through year 11th, we found a kid selling in the year below. Dan made his threats, as did I. We didn't need more competition, but the kid persisted, so Dan got his dudes. Dan and his mates were all the chaps. Yes, even a grammar school had chaps, smart chaps in fact, and after school he broke into the kid's locker, stole his goods, and left a note telling him to watch out. Well, the kid didn't take heed. Instead he got his own friends in his own year to help stash his goods and protect them. We figured out what he was doing. If we broke into his friends' lockers they could report us, because as far as they were concerned, they were just holding on some stuff for their mate, who we'll refer to as Flapjack from now on. As we were in the middle of dealing with Flapjack, we learned another kid, year 8, 12 years old, started his own selling ring. Things were starting to blow up out of proportion and I knew the writing was on the wall. I quietly pulled out of selling junk food and retired. Watching the mess of the next few weeks, the floodgates had been opened. Once one kid showed he wasn't scared of Dan, then they all knew they didn't have to be scared of him. The number of sellers skyrocketed, but our smart chav was not gonna have any of it. £900 is a lot of faking money per week for anyone. For a teenager it's huge. It all started when I went to go buy a Sprite from Flapjack. Dan didn't sell them, and I'd find his class at lunch. Couple of the girls in the class tell me he's not in, but his friend might be selling in the quad. Alright, I find his mate and he just gives it to me, free of charge. Turns out someone, Dan's goons, jumped Flapjack the night before, and he was beat up bad. His mate saw the writing on the wall and wanted to get rid of his stock, but he warned me some of Flapjack's other mates were gunning for revenge. Well, Dan being the loudmouth that he was, it pretty quickly became rumor he ordered the jump of Flap. Lo and behold, at the end of the week Dan got jumped and his money stolen. Shit was quickly blowing up out of control. The teachers started raising the alarm that kids were coming in beaten black and blue, but wouldn't admit to why. Our head pretty quickly put 2 and 2 together and declared anyone caught illegally selling junk food would be given a straight expulsion. The stakes were higher than ever, but this did not deter Dan and Flapjack. Every day there were raids in each other's common rooms, stealing of goods, skirmishes between their respective goons in the hallways. People in both classes were getting a bit weary that kids from another class they didn't know would sneak into their room and steal shit. It all came to a head when Dan laid a trap. He got a baby monitor and stuck it in his locker and sat in the classroom next door with his goons. To confess, my part 1 became a prefect and was in charge of the hall the classrooms were on. I decided to turn a blind eye. After all, I was Dan's man and informant. Flapjack and his 2 goons walked into our form, and not a moment later Dan stormed in with 4 lads from our year. I saw a chair thrown. I saw one kid get thrown into the wall. Another slammed against the door and none of it sounded pretty. At this point I decided I really needed the toilet because I knew nothing good would come of this. At the end of lunch Dan had a black eye, some of his goods had torn shirts, and it was obvious they'd been in a fight. We were told our last lesson was delayed as our head wanted to speak to us. He burst through our door like a raging erection and I knew at that point someone was gonna get faked. He pointed at me and said you, my office, now and asked me what I saw. I feigned innocence and said nothing out the ordinary today. Spent the first 15 minutes on watch, went to grab lunch, precisely when the attack happened, came back at the last 15 minutes. Our head wasn't happy with my answer, but couldn't do nothing, since I ain't no snitch. He ended up going to every form and opening all the lockers. Everyone caught with a large number of junk foods were to report to his office. A fake tan and flap got suspended for a few weeks. No one actually got expelled but everyone was warned anyone caught doing it again would get kicked out. Dan started again 4 months before the end of year and would go on to become a drug dealer TLDR. Kids trying to make an honest living at school quickly descends to gangs of new English school madness and people get hurt. Our school had lots of horse chestnut trees. Lots. To the extent of, in September, when conkers started falling from trees, the school gave students incentives to pick up fallen nuts as they littered every outdoor area of the school grounds. You could trade in a bin bag full of conkers for a plastic bag full of sweets. This was never a really big deal for me, but it was clearly huge for other kids. Every morning break, hundreds of students would hit the playground and collect as many conkers as they could. This definitely helped clear up the school, but it created some problems. Students would form mafia type groups and promise to split the loot once they gave in their bag full of conkers. As lots of students were interested in getting a literal bucket load of sweets, conkers disappeared pretty fast. Kids did bring in conkers from elsewhere, but this didn't seem to be enough. Fights started breaking out in the playground. Then something very interesting started happening. As the supply of conkers dwindled, kids started arriving at school with old toys, games, accessories, etc. to sell for conkers. Conkers were now a currency, a legitimate currency that you could buy faking marbles, cool stationery, and even Game Boy games with. I'm not kidding. Some kids were so desperate for their sweet loot that they were prepared to sell anything. They no longer were particularly attached to point. When I found out about this, I started to get interested. That's when the horse chestnut tree at the front of my garden became my literal money tree. Every few days in autumn, I'd pick up as many conkers as I could, and I'd lug them to school with me. I realized that compared to some people, having conkers was a big deal. The value they placed on items was ridiculous. A hairbrush for 10 conkers, a video game for 30 conkers. I mean, come on. This stuff was so cheap I almost felt bad. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I may have collapsed the conker economy of my school, as I ended up buying tons of stuff each day. Which meant prices rose, which meant kids couldn't afford to buy and sell stuff properly with conkers, which led to kids getting very upset and telling the principal. Once the school caught on to what was happening, the fights, the conker economy, people selling their parents' precious items for conkers, they shut it down. Looking back, I'm surprised it took them so long to actually get worried about it. No sweets, but conkers still stayed around. People enjoyed collecting them, even if they no longer had any material value. TLDR, helped destroy my school playground's economy with a lot of conkers. I'm pretty sure this was the 3rd or 4th grade. T.DL.R. I sold anti-bullying weapons and propaganda. I was really stupid. I used to come inside at recess and steal all the blackboard chalk. I ground it up into dust and divided it into balloons. I had no friends. When snipped open and thrown at something, a huge cloud of chalk dust would be released into the air. I sold these to kids as bully repellents for 50 cents or ice cream or pop or something of relatively equal cost. It depended on the kid. There was one kid who I think had autism maybe, but he wasn't identified. My dad did daycare for teens with autism, so I was around that a lot, and he got made fun of, pushed and hit constantly. I made a ton of them for him for free. Bullying was a problem at my school, but I was more of a physical fighter than some kids my age. Plus people avoided me because I was the weird kid who was always alone. So I wanted to find a way to help other kids get rid of their bullies in a way that wasn't exactly physically violent, but was just more of a hilarious and effective way of publicly shaming that person as a bully. Because if a person came inside from recess covered in chalk dust, it meant that they are bullying a kid in my grade and they would be made fun of for a day for being in a hole covered in chalk. Unfortunately, the teachers began rallying together to figure out who the mysterious chalk thief was and why kids were coming inside covered in colorful dust and called bullies be their peers. So they started waiting in classrooms to see who came in during recess. I got caught by my own teacher who was pissed, but asked me what I was doing. I told her the truth, and she said, if I stop now she won't breathe a word to anybody, not even my parents. I stopped and she didn't tell anyone, but then the teachers got hardcore about bullying on the playground and I like to think I caused it. So I sold anti-bullying propaganda and weapons on the school's black market. Edit. I wasn't really interested in the economic aspects of this. I was stealing it, so I got it for free. I occasionally got a free ice cream or soda, and I was just straight up bored and very antisocial. Free lunch tickets for 50 cents. When I was in 2nd grade, my elementary school used red tickets, the ones that look like raffle tickets, for the kids who qualified for free lunches. The yellow tickets were $0.75 and the green tickets were full price at $1.25. Kids' parents would give them the money for lunch for the week on Mondays and they would buy the tickets for the week. Some kids would bring the money for a full month and be given however many tickets they paid for. Every day you handed the lady at the door of the cafeteria a ticket or showed her your homemade bag lunch and then went in to eat. In the school office they kept the rolls of tickets on the principal's desk. I was bullied a lot, getting beaten up by the older kids, once stabbed in the leg with a pencil, which I have a scar from, and ended up in there often. Basically whenever I would go to a teacher and ask for help. No clue why I would get in trouble, but whatever, it's just how it was. One day, after I went in, because the same kids had torn up my ticket and told me I was already fat enough, so I shouldn't eat more, I decided to recoup my loss and steal a ticket from the roll on the principal's desk. I was pretty salty because I was one of the kids who brought a bag lunch every day and I was finally able to get lunch from the cafeteria. I didn't get caught for taking the ticket, and that's when it occurred to me that the rich kids were buying their lunch for $1.25 a day and would probably pay me to be able to keep some of the money if I stole more tickets and sold them for less than their lunches usually cost. So the next time I was in the principal's office the roll of red tickets was sitting on his desk. I pulled off a ton and stashed them in my backpack. I told a couple of kids in my class who were complaining about not getting an allowance that week about the tickets and offered to sell them at 50 cents each, basically allowing them to pocket the extra cash their parents had given them. This became the usual for me for maybe 6 months. The extra money was nice, but the best part was that for those months literally everyone was being nice to me, even the kids who usually bullied me. I was eventually caught because even though the lady in the cafeteria didn't really pay attention, one of the very rich kids used a red ticket and she told someone and he told them what I was doing. Amazingly I didn't get kicked out of the school, only suspended for ages because my dad spun it in a way that celebrated my thinking like an entrepreneur. I still had my ass beat when I got home though. Edit. Spacing. Sorry, on mobile. All high school I had a pass from a teacher. Left every day for the library as my homeroom period was filled with assholes and I was the quiet kid. Instead of write a new pass every day she signed one and laminated it in wood with marker, write the time and place so I'd get out of class. Thing was so could I. With her signature it was never questioned. Some kids found out and I'd rent it for the day. Just buy me fries. Get out when and where you wanted. Just say I need to finish a test. Need to help set up for lab. We also sold elevator passes to freshmen, but we didn't really have an elevator on math day. We had to wear ties. Everyone would forget. Brother got 10 from the dollar store that night of the school colors and sold them at $3. Kids didn't want detention and he'd usually make enough for snacks on our bus ride home. Obviously some kids selling drugs and refilling jewel pods, but also for some reason Pornhub accounts. pay a couple bucks, and get the Pornhub premium password. Some kids would watch weird shit, and I guess, since it's the same account, the two owners would find out and kick them. It was either dead people or passed out girls' middle school fathead stickers. The boys' table at lunch looked like Wall Street. I only ever got one pack for Christmas. Ended up with maybe 25 out of the 10. Didn't know the players well, so I had mostly smaller ones, but I still had enough big ones to be cool and to have people negotiating trades. Chris Johnson for football, I had him, was worth like 5 little guys or $4. TLDR, I sold candy for a class project and then turned it into a pretty good business. Then my project partner tried to Winklevoss me out of my money. I used to sell candy from my locker in elementary school. I quickly made a few $100 with zero idea what money was or how much I made. I just knew I liked making money. The whole thing started as a class project to create a business. Everyone else made pillows or other arts and craft. I just bought candy from Sam's Club and sold it by the piece. I sold mints, Laffy Taffers, gummy bear dime bags, just small bags lol, 5 Hershey Kisses, York peppermint patties, and a few other things. In between classes I would run to my locker and start peddling. I would pocket $5-10 between each class, and like $15-20 during lunch, and then another $10 after school was out. I made like $40-50 in profit a day by going to school. The school caught on after about 2 months and shut me down. As I got to my locker, my stash was all gone. I assumed some kid stole it, but it was only minutes later I was called to the principal's office and was told to shut it down. The funniest part of the whole thing was my classmate who I was partnered with tried Winklevossing me and tried multiple times to get half of the money I made post project. I split the profits from the first week because it was part of the project, but once it was finished I refused to split. What makes the story even funnier is that he ended up investing a pretty large amount into Bitcoin and made a fortune just like the Winklevoss twins. We laugh about the whole thing now. The reason I didn't share the money was because the whole thing was my plan. I went out to get the candy, I fronted the money, and I did all the selling. He was just partnered with me by the teacher and he did not do anything except meet with me once in the beginning, stood in front of the class as I presented, and pocketed the money at the end. I did end up having a business partner who sold down the hallway. I supplied the candy and he sold it and got a cut. I was literally about to expand markets into the middle school in a different part of the building, but my dream was shut down before it could grow into a true empire. My parents were pretty proud that I made so much money all on my own and was annoyed at the school for shutting me down. I learned more from those months than I did from many years of school, and many of the lessons I learned from this business I applied in my future ventures. The whole thing makes for a great story. Maybe one day Hollywood will pick up this story and make a movie out of it. My brother had the best scheme. He was born in 1983, and a 3 is very easily changed to a 0. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, security measures on drivers' licenses where I live, and his friend's father had a laminating business. They would wait until people got their full license, then edit their learner's permit to look like they were 3 years older. He would remove the lamination, scratch off parts on the 3, and fill it in with black Sharpie to look like a 0. He used baby powder to make the license shiny, relaminated it, and bing bang boom, you've got the most convincing fake it, because it's literally government issued it. So 16-year-olds had ID that said they were 19, so they could legally purchase alcohol. Canadian here, I think he was charging like $100 each and making a killing. My mom got suspicious where he was getting so much money and thought he was selling drugs. She snooped through his room and saw baby powder spilled. Thinking it was cocaine, she tasted it, like they do in the movies, having no clue how to tell if it was coke. She confronted my brother. The truth came out, and the jig was up. Fortunately he wasn't caught by the cops. I was the kid getting everyone sneakers and clothes from American websites. Started when I was 15, and ended it 3 years later, because it started getting too big for me. Romania, mid 2000s. Brand sneakers / clothes were notoriously expensive and the local suppliers had loads of fakes. The only way you could get cheap and original clothes was through me. I was the only kid in my school doing it, and the only guy in the city who did it directly without middlemen, meaning you get the stuff in 10 to 14 days. And I was the cheapest, because I wasn't looking to get rich. To put things in perspective, a pair of Adidas/Nike sneakers was about 3.000.000 old Ron back then. About $130 in those days. They weren't even current season. Now I could get you the current season model for 30 to 40 bucks if they were on sale. I remember vividly that Vans just came out with their slip-ons which were $20 on sale. I sold sheet loads of Vans. Literally every week, at least 10 to 15 pairs. Nike Hoodies for $25 on sale, while you'd get them for $100 plus locally sheet was bananas. All the kids in my school were pimped out with original clothes, and back then Romania wasn't even in the EU, and getting them at reasonable prices was next to impossible. I like to think I had a positive impact on the community, because when me and my friends went to college in other cities they were met with a lot of "Wows, where'd you get the sneakers, man?" Apparently this business was really expensive there and not run by high schoolers, thus not available for high schoolers. When I was in high school, most of the juniors and seniors who had their license could drive and eat off campus. If you didn't have a car you weren't allowed to leave during lunch. One of these enterprising juniors would put in an order for a few party subs at a nearby sandwich chain. He got permission to get out of his last class a few minutes early so he could book it down to pick up the subs and then make it back to set up shop. He had the place pre-cut them into 3-inch sections which he then sold for $2 each. A sub that cost him like $8, this was many years ago, would return triple his outlay. This continued for a few months until suddenly the guy gets suspended. There was no rule about bringing food from off campus, nor for selling food on campus. He was suspended for leaving campus during class period despite the fact he had permission to leave a few minutes early. The teacher, probably though he was smart and enterprising and wanted to support his endeavor. Anyway, right after he gets suspended, tada, new rule is announced, outside food must be eaten off campus. The following week the cafeteria suddenly and out of nowhere announced they would be offering sandwiches from the exact same chain. Except these were offered plain/no toppings. The kid had ordered with every topping, and you could just pick off what you didn't like, and now cost $3.50 for the same 3-inch size. Edit. TLDR cafeteria Mayfair kills black market sandwich business to be able to continue their shitty monopoly of ripping kids off. Not other kids. Me. In 4th grade I had an enterprise going selling Jolly Ranchers. I talked my mom into investing in the company by buying the first bag, and then I took them to school. I was your regular drug dealer of sugar that first day. The first one was free. Then I charged $0.05 each. For a week, I was really smart about it. In order to combat potential problems, I told all the kids I needed the wrappers back. The last enterprise, someone else had airheads years before, had only been shut down upon wrappers being left everywhere. So I collected them back. I was selling them for $0.05 each, and every day, I'd come home and give my mom $1.99 plus tax for a new bag. I'd bank all but $0.50 in change to have for the next day, and off I'd go. At recess, I had to avoid kids swarming me. It was great. Unfortunately, kids in other classes often wanted to eat them later and wouldn't give back the wrappers, so they started showing up in the hallways, on the playground, and in their classrooms. By the time I got shut down, I was selling 5-6 bags a day. I learned from Henry Huggins and the Beverly Cleary books not to accept credit, like the time he found and sold gum. Eventually someone ratted me out, and I went back to only bringing enough candy for me to munch all day long, sadly. But I bought some badass pirate Lego sets with my haul. 1. 5th and 6th grade. Our school had an unchecked bullying problem. I was a small kid and often picked on until I organized a bodyguard service by paying the 3 biggest kids $1 to provide protection to the shrimps kids, who would each pay me $20 per week. I eventually had laminated ID tags made for the protectors and encouraged them to wear sport coats. The service became a brand at school and gave the former bullies some sense of belonging and purpose. I had about 20 kids paying for the service and about 20 protectors working. Soon all the bullies wanted to work as protectors and we were lacking actual bullies. That's when things took a turn. We started coordinating inside bullying, and I'd come behind 5 minutes later to the bullied kids and introduce this protection service. I don't remember why we stopped or what became of it. Maybe summer came. And that's how I became boss of the bullies, before I hit puberty. 2. Me and my brothers were the only people on school with internet and Napster. We sold hundreds of music CDs with customized list of songs for $20 each. 3. Chicago Auto Show. I brought a wagon to bring home hundreds of the free printed posters and sold them throughout the year for cash. Everyone had to have posters on their walls in those days. 4. 6th grade. My mom had a color printer and I learned Microsoft Publisher Word art. Everyone had plastic name tag sleeves on their desks and would doodle extra stuff to customize this. I sold printed name tags for $5 EA. I even had a binder full of all the options I'd use to make the sale. 5. 9th grade. Our school began offering violin in the music program, and we got a new 20-something female violin teacher. She was very popular and all of a sudden 150 students are taking up the violin. The local musical instrument dealer we were sent to in town sold student violins for $350, which is where I bought mine. I found a tag inside with the wholesaler's information on it and ended up doing a deal to sell 50 violins for about $50 margin on each. Also, did the same with violin shoulder rests that would clip on. Back when I was in middle school, to teach us at an early age about finances, business, and the economy in general, our school had its own currency exclusively for students, called Wildebucks or Wilds as students called it and symbolized with. It was named after our mascot the Wildcat, and almost anything a student wanted from the school had to be paid in wilds. Need to buy a new pencil sharpener. 5. Want to keep a library book a month longer than its return date. 25. Needed to fix your laptop in one day, instead of waiting a week for them to fix 12 other students' laptops first. You can push yourself to top priority with 40. Want the best seats at school concerts/plays. 50. How do we get wilders? You may be wondering. One way is by scoring high enough on all homework, quizzes, or tests by the end of the week, which at average will get you somewhere between 35 to 64 a week, which isn't enough income to cover all expenses. So, to handle that, students could do extra credit work which gave them an extra 10, or start their own in-school businesses. The principal allowed this, believing it was a great way for students to learn about how the economy works. Holy faking shit, did she come to regret that decision in the year that followed. Everything started out fine. You had students opening up shops during lunch period, selling snacks, school supplies, t-shirts, accessories. They even hired other students to work for them, so those students could have income. However, if you were a social outcast, you were faked. No one would hire you or buy anything from you if you were ugly, mentally ill, a geek/dork, or for whatever other reasons they hated you. So your only option in that position was to either become a sociopathic social climbing people pleaser or join the black market by selling stuff the school doesn't allow. Like answer sheets for homework and upcoming quizzes/tests, firecrackers, lockpicks, items stolen from the gym, basketballs, footballs, jump ropes, items stolen from other students, BB guns, weed. Yes, faking weed. The fact there were students dealing drugs, both of them expelled when caught by correctional officers, wasn't even the insane part. The insane part was that they were so ingrained into this system that either they were too stupid to realize or somehow forgot that they could have charged money for those things. Actual money. The richest sellers in the black market were of course the school bullies, and were the only ones who got to buy cool stuff and do cool things with the popular kids and successful merchants who were all rolling in wilds anyway. After realizing she inadvertently created a dangerous social experiment, the principal immediately shut the whole thing down for the rest of the school year. It was eventually brought back the next year, but with restrictions. Edit. Almost forgot to mention, one student who was running for class president and had thousands of wilds was even using her wealth to bribe people into voting for her. The shutdown happened before elections though. Okay, so I know I'm late to the thread, but I finally have a relevant story, so I'm gonna tell it. Back in middle school and high school I sold candy like many others in this thread, but it wasn't a black market, more of a candy cartel. So basically my mom had a Costco membership, so I would buy candy in bulk and sell in between classes. Well, soon I was selling faster than I could keep up and also needed to bring product in without it being obvious. This is where being the good kid paid off. You see, I was in the band, so I had a band locker which had more space so that we could store our instruments, more room for candy, and our instrument cases had compartments that folded out that you could carry around without anyone suspecting. Soon I had about 12 band members selling candy from their instrument cases. When the administration started cracking down on us not having candy in class, we switched up and started selling gum, which was allowed and more profitable, honestly. My proudest moment was selling those zebra stripe gum packets that last all of 5 seconds for like $0.25 a stick, which kids would gladly pay and then pay again later in class. I actually made enough to buy my first Nintendo DS. Eventually one of the other kids got busted with his empty violin case filled with candy bars and loose change and bills and ratted me out. They tried to suspend me, but I showed that nowhere in the school's code of conduct did it prohibit what I was doing. I got out of the suspension, but they did issue out a new written rule against selling things in school, but it was fun while it lasted. I felt like middle school Scarface man, haha. Pages from a Born magazine. I found one page was $1 each. School master keys. Like everyone, they take the path of least resistance. My school bought their locks at a local hardware store. That store sold said locks with said master key. The lock and key was like $10 and the key alone was $2. I bought the keys and sold them to other students for $10. Point it was mostly used by seniors, so they could eat their lunch and leave their bags in class, or leave their bags in the class they had after lunch, so they didn't have to carry it with them all day. Fake Rolexes. I think they were movie props or something. I found a box of them, like Payday 2 jewelry heist type box, 24 or so, sold them for $50 each. They weren't worth $5. I told everyone they were fake too. I guess they liked the novelty, made them seem edgy or something. Cracked copies of Half-Life. Point internet cafe time. I installed Half-Life and Counter-Strike on school PCs, and we sold it as internet cafe time during lunch break. $3 for the lunch, and there was a queue every day. I made 1/3, the teacher made 1/3, and the school made 1/3. 25 PCs at 5 days a week. I was making $125 going to school alone. Point techwear. All the school PCs were upgraded by me, from sheet I got from Skip's RAM upgrades, HDD upgrades, Mac Plus headsets. I once sold the school 25 headsets I found in a Skip, $5 each, again x 25. That was an easy $125. Often government buildings would throw out bulk loads of sheet. Point once sold turf as hash to a guy, calcium as cocaine, and piss as poppers. Sorry, I was that guy, mostly to dickheads, but that doesn't excuse the sheet I pulled. Everyone trying so hard to impress each other with how high they felt. I just couldn't resist. Point office space. I rented a small office for a reasonable price near school. I used it as storage for all my sheet I was wheeling and dealing, and also offered people the ability to leave their books there as at school didn't have lockers. The storage fees alone covered the office rental price. Pens and pencils. At first it was as 5 students trading them, then 60, then the whole school is doing this. The lowest were the cheap 20 plus for $1 kind of pens and pencils. Medium ground were the Amazon pencils and factory reject pens, and the high-end stuff consisted of fine wood and super expensive pens. Graphic pencils would be valued on design. Point. Now that the scale is out of the way, let me share a story. Point. I capitalized on the medium tier pencils by spending $20 on 200 Amazon pencils, which in turn allowed me to invest in whatever pencil/pen was on top. At the time, there were 5 ultra fancy sleek black pencils circulating, and I wanted to have them as a show of power. So I'll own 50 Amazon pencils, on the promise from a client that I'd get back 75. He came through, and with my combined stocks, I took over the daily pencil trade and bought 4 or 5 special pencils at once. It costed me 200 pencils, but no, I wasn't done. Now that there was only one in market, that price for that pencil inflated like crazy. The price for one of those pencils went from 50 apiece to 150. On the same day, I set up a meeting with 4 clients interested in buying one on the same day. I used others in my group to conduct the other 3 meetings while I sat with one. The clients in the other 3 would be under the impression that my group had gone behind my back and are selling the pencils for cheap. All 3 went through, and after I got done with the main client, combined I had made 400 Amazon grade pencils and 50 reject pens. I became the richest pencil/pen man in the school. I'll share another one if I can get 100 iSharp votes. 4th year of high school, Philippines. I was enrolled in a parish-run Catholic school. They had this weird system that, in order to buy lunch or snacks from the cafeteria, you had to drop by a booth selling coupons of equivalent peso value and only then be able to purchase any food with the coupons, and this was absolutely mandatory. There wasn't really any difference to buying food with real money other than the coupons added an unnecessary step. The reason the school gave for implementing the coupon system was that handling paper coupons instead of real money was more sanitary, but everyone knew this was bullshit. Another stupid thing was that all the food in the cafeteria was sold at jacked up prices, mostly double sometimes triple the prices they had outside of the school, and this system worked because the parish closed all the gates during breaks and class hours and there was no way to escape to buy from the outside, since the walls were around 12 feet high with barbed wire. There were 3 denominations of coupons, 1, 5, and 20, made of cardstock colored white, orange, and green respectively. One day I decided to take home one of the 20's coupons and scan it with the intention of printing my own. The scan looked rather blurry, so I decided to make a digital master of the coupon, font, denomination, even the official seal of the school, which was easy to get because they had a website. For the green cardstock, I easily found a good number of them from a local office supply store. I began printing out 20 coupons the following week and selling each for half price 10, which the other students quite happily enjoyed purchasing. Later on I would organize several other students to be my distributors to further distance me from inquisitive eyes, minus the cost of the materials and ink which I had to buy every week, or so I estimate my average profit per day going to $1,000 to $1,500, which is around 6 times the minimum wage. I was extremely careful with my transactions and never got caught. I did this for the entire school year and ended up helping my parents pay the bills, buying my own laptop as well as a laptop for my younger brother, and paying for my entire first year of college after I had graduated high school. This was the old curriculum. High school only went up to 4th year. Best time of my life. I ran a multimedia pornography distribution network out of my elementary school. I grew up in the pre-internet, found Playboy in the woods era of early illicit education. My friend and I used to go dumpster diving for discarded toys and refundable drink bottles, pre-widespread recycling era as well. Tim's father never questioned how we ended up with 3 or 4 garbage bags of empties every week, but he was happy to drive us to the refund depot for a cut of the cash. One day Tim pops out of an apartment building dumpster with a milk crate full of dirty magazines. Blew our 9-year-old minds. He had a treehouse for secure storage, and soon a solid reputation as the place to hang out for enlightened young gentlemen. We also soon discovered that those magazines we found were regularly restocked. Every month another dozen or so showed up in the same dumpster. Soon we ran out of room to hide our library, and coincidentally another kid from our school came up with the suggestion of buying one from us. And so an entrepreneur was born. Over the next year we established a consistent $30 to $40 a month income stream, split evenly and funneled immediately into a rapidly spiraling Transformers addiction. It was around that time that our friend Shane discovered that the giant hot tub-sized satellite dish in his backyard also provided channels of thoroughly illuminating programming. Enjoying the benefits of early VCR recording ability on timers to come on at night, and blank tapes purchased in bulk, funded by magazine sales, we expanded our media empire and soon found ourselves serving the needs of multiple surrounding schools, including junior and senior high students, all before reaching grade 6. I credit this experience with igniting my lifelong love of sales and entrepreneurship, and I like to think I had a fairly direct hand in the sexual education of a significant percentage of my generation in this city. A kid at my school who just graduated in 2019 sold soda, Soda is a big want in our school. Our school recently got in trouble for having the soda machines on during instructional hours. The administration acted like it was a glitch in the system and insisted they didn't know. That was a load of shit. The principals were also the lunch monitors and would literally watch students purchase soda out of the vending machines. They'd even buy it themselves instead of walking upstairs to the teacher's lounge. Anyways, this soda selling kid is a major stoner who would bring a duffel bag of any soda you could think of. He would sell them for $1 and would give a quarter to people. He would give him empty bottles and then sell those to people who needed bottles for their chewing tobacco for 50 cents. Did this for 4 years, made $30 a day. Also had a kid who would bring cakes to school and sell them. The kid got so popular that he would customize cakes and sell them to teacher, made good money too. Eventually the underground bakery got shut down by administration. But as for the soda kid, he never got caught. The principals didn't care. They felt sorry for the kid because he would purposely dress poor and say it was his only source of income. He literally made great money by lying and making underground deals. Smartest kid on earth. Made more doing that than I do at my part-time job. He is still a great friend. We fish almost every week. He plans on working at a Pepsi company. For 3 straight years of high school I ran a ruthless cutthroat market selling snacks and sodas as well as homework. This was the story of the candy cartel. The market was very challenging to get started into. There were teachers and students that sold sodas and snacks for some pretty high prices. To ensure that I'd be able to sell with no repercussions, I went straight to the top. I asked our school principal if I'd be able to sell snacks and sodas to raise sodas for a missions trip. There was no missions trip. Fast forward 1 week and I'm at Walmart, Labor Day weekend. There's a sale running for 24 packs of Pepsi products for $2.99 each. Assuming I sell all of them at $0.50, I'd be able to undercut the market and have some more money to profit. It was a flawless plan. The first week of sales goes well. Kids want their sugar. With the sales of sodas going well, it was time to turn our attention to streamlining the process of buying a soda. I couldn't carry several sodas in my backpack every day. People had to have a place to go. And so I hatched a plan. First I acquired a small lunch cooler, one that had frozen pockets and could keep the sodas cold without needing to waste precious space for ice packs. I bought 20 of them. At this point I had enough soda to last me the next months. If everything sold, which it did, I'd manage to have about $575 of profit to turn around into selling more sodas. At this point people started hearing rumors of the man who sold the sodas, the plug they called me. And so business was amazing at this point. I was taking in about $20 a day, but it wouldn't last forever. Another teacher started selling sodas. This teacher had a leg up on me with more options, but a higher price. Something had to be done. I was losing customers to the 9th grade English teacher. There was a solution. While this teacher sold sodas, she didn't have snacks. And that is what the kids really wanted. So I made a trip. There was a wholesale foods distributor about 3 hours away, so I borrowed almost $200 from my parents, telling them I'd pay them back in full with interest. I bought so many snacks. Twinkies, Tasta cakes, Nutty Buddies, Cosmic Brownies, oatmeal cream peas. This was perfect. The items I bought were dirt cheap, 4 shopping carts worth of them, and kids didn't check expiration dates when they were hungry. I purchased these and sold them each for $0.50 a pop. After a while my competition bowed out. No one could sustain their business with me undercutting everyone. Enter junior year of high school. I've been working summers and making connections with friends. I've got 2 people who worked with me to build my empire into a flourishing network of sugar. With my plan hatched and new resources acquired, it was time to begin anew. It first started by selling the usually soda and snacks. Business was good, but I wanted to up the stakes as new players had emerged and they wanted a price of the pie. 2 Girl Scouts has started selling cookies and the competition was fierce. It became a game of who could control the classrooms. The school was split and I was losing corners and real estate. Enter RK. RK worked at the local movie theater. At the time every Tuesday there was a sale on all candy being sold. Employees could also use their discount and pay only $0.25 for a large bag of Skittles, something that would normally cost $5. Bingo. I found my way to cut out the competition. But I decided to go a step further. Enter CW. CW worked at the local gas station beside my house. The routine was simple. I would walk in, buy 25 Tic Tacs for $0.50. I'd then get a receipt for each transaction as I'd buy them separately. I'd then go home and complete the survey saying how good CW was. In exchange, his boss would give CW these coupons for a free meal as well as raises and promotions. This worked perfectly because CW would then give me those coupons to sell. Those coupons I could sell at $2 for a quick increase to profits. The Girl Scouts were finished. About halfway through my junior year there was a problem. I was getting too big for one locker, and complaints were flooding in that people didn't want to rummage through lockers and not find what they were looking for. This came with an opportunity. I reached out to several of my closest friends and offered them a deal. They let me rent out their lockers in exchange for being able to take whatever they wanted from the store whenever they felt like it. It was a success. With my stock stashed over several different lockers, it was easy to tell people which lockers to go to, but this also came with a problem. People could easily steal my food and drinks without me knowing. So I hired several kids to rotate shifts, keeping eyes on my food and lockers by way of Skype on phones, being set up in the lockers for the entire day. At this point, I was getting big. Too big. One of my sellers made a mistake of offering a narc some soda in the form, "Do you want to buy some coke?" The narc took this to be the drug, cocaine, and thus I was in a pickle. Everyone started pointing fingers saying that I was the supplier. I was pulled into the principal's office with the other student accusing me of selling cocaine. After being presented the evidence, I explained that I sold Coca-Cola out of my locker. Maybe it was the fact that the faculty bought my drinks, or that students stepped up to bat for me. But in the end I never was told to stop selling, and thus I continued. In my final year of high school it was a pretty tame year. Selling, buying, selling again. Things were more or less the same as the last 2 years. But I was immortalized by my school as the plug, and at the end of it all, the candy cartel was a successful operation for 3 long years. Hundreds of sodas were bought and sold, cash was flowing, and at the end of it all, I was staring at about $3,000 of total profit. After paying my friends and those that worked for me, I was left with about $2,000. From what I've heard, the candy cartel still runs to this day. Students pass down leadership from one person to another, and every now and then people in my town will come up and ask me if I was the plug. I still have all my transaction books that I kept, and who still owes me money to this day. But that matters not. For that is the tale of the candy cartel. TLDR. I sold lots and lots of soda and candy, undercutting competitors and Girl Scouts. At the end of high school I made about $3,000 in profit for my labors. My middle school had a market on several things, all consisting of the same currency though. We had a weird fun buck thing, where a teacher can reward a student for being good. There was also a similar type of fake money that was given every semester to students who had B's or higher, and if you had 4 or more you got ice cream at lunch. Anyways, back to the fun bucks. These wolf bucks had no real monetary value, but we were all like 13, so we don't have real money, and thus the wolf buck market begin. Gum. 1 wolf buck. Unless it's a 5 gum then it's 2. An eraser? That'll be 1 or 2 wolf bucks depending on the size. The market was mainly inexpensive things that'd make class go by a little nicer. Hell, I even had a small wooden box with my prices on a paper for it. Eventually, as teachers really didn't like this blue market, the wolf bucks were blue, mainly as the kids who thrived were often those who didn't get any normally. Now the reason you wanted wolf bucks was because the school ran a wolf buck based student store that had essentially middle school clout. Book covers, dope as pencils, topper erasers, it was all to appear less boring at a glance. The wolf buck market kinda only was around for my 8th grade year, so I don't know if it ever lasted longer than my last year there. I wanna believe now they've evolved from black marketing wolf bucks to straight up printing them. TLDR is school had a fun buck given to good students and less good students sold stuff for said fun buck. This was all in high school. We had money that we earned in classes by doing extra assignments and for good behavior. We ran off copies and used a hand-carved stamp on matching paper and ran a major counterfeiting operation. The vending machines also only recognized the size of a bill and numbers but none of the other features. So we discovered we could photocopy money, and if cut out carefully, we could get the machine to accept them. We totally emptied the machines, which the school then removed unfortunately. We built a red box in the electronics lab that reproduced the specificities tones that quarters would make in a payphone and made all our phone calls for free. We also built a chrome box that we used to trigger the opticum sensors on the traffic lights in front of the school, and one day turned it on and left it the grass, where it kept the cross traffic light perpetually green and the bus lane perpetually red. That one got a police response, but they were never able to catch us. We also sold born on 5 1/4 inches floppy disks for $1 each, $2 if you wanted to choose your genre, and $10 for a zip disk with a significant chunk of the content from the BBS that we ran. Not much other than that, unless you count regular mischief like rerouting the intercom lines from the tunnels under the school, or smoking weed and drinking snake bites up on the theater scaffolding when everyone else was in class and we were free to roam with our forged hall passes. In elementary they had caught being goods in which a teacher would give a kid that did something exceptionally good or helpful. These would then be put into weekly drawings for prizes that you would expect at an elementary level: novelty pencils, candy, trinkets, etc. They had a line to be signed by the teacher, so a kid could not make their own. I got held in from recess for chewing gum, being told to spit it out. I did, but put a new one in my mouth the second the teacher turned his back. He made me spit it out and told me I had to give him my pack of gum. I did, but made some wisecrack, and he told me I was staying in for recess. Well, he left shortly after recess started, probably to go to the bathroom or whatever. I decided to get my gum back, opened his drawer and found my gum and what had to be a few hundred of the caught being goods, and even more surprising is he had signed them all. If they had no signature they would be worthless. So I took them all, and for maybe a month the entire economy of these were knocked out of whack. Moreover, the types of kids now winning the drawings were kids that most teachers did not think would be winning them. Finally, one kid I had given some to got caught doing some stupid thing, and the little prick rolled on me to try to shift the attention from himself. I got confronted and I got suspended for a day, and they ended up totally changing the design and color to totally make the ones I had given out worthless. So for a little period of time the black market was in ill-gotten elementary currency, totally turning their program upside down. Cinnamon toothpicks. I'd get a bottle of cinnamon oil and soak the toothpicks in it. Then I'd sell them for a dime each or 4.25. I started doing well because mine were considered spicier than the other toothpick dealers. I also would give out a free toothpick to a new customer so they could taste the quality. This seemed like an easy way to get new buyers. I kept a bottle and toothpicks, both unsoaked and soaked, with me in a cigar box. For a couple of weeks I was bringing in a surprising amount of cash. It all came to an end when somebody squealed on me. I had been approached by a guy who had convinced several people to sell his toothpicks for him. He supplied them before school and never carried them himself. He wanted me to tell him how I was making them so spicy. It wasn't rocket science. I just didn't let them dry, and he wanted me to join his crew of sellers. His product was sheet, because he'd give his people the toothpicks dry and wrapped in paper towels. I knew that given a choice, people would buy mine over his. When I turned him down he tried to threaten me. It didn't work. Soon after the vice principal stopped me and took my cigar box. He didn't even ask what was in it. He just rolled up and said, "Give me that box." My competition had informed the school what I was doing and where I kept it. That was the end of my dealer days. I live in Canada. I ran a cigarette racket for 2 years at my high school. I had made friends with a store owner that used to get duty-free cigarettes dirt cheap. He'd sell a 25 pack for 5.00 even. Now he would sell to a few kids, but for the most part only to people he knew. I was 14, but we were cool, so I was one of the few people he'd sell to. I'd go around at first break and take an order, collect money, etc. My fee was 2 smokes from every pack. My orders would look like 2 packs of Export Light, 5 packs of Do More Irregular, 4 packs of John Players Special, 3 Players Light, 4 packs of whatever duty free, usually Rothmans. At lunch, I'd whip down right at the bell before the big rush of kids going to the pizza joint next door. I'd have over $100 in various denominations of coin and small bills. He never counted it. I never shorted him. We had a system point. I would then meet up with my friends/customers about half a click away. Hand out the smokes, collect my fees, usually a pack and a half total point. I could also then turn around and sell losers for $1 a piece. People actually paid it easily. All in all, I didn't have to pay for smokes for a long time and always had enough to get lunch or whatever. It was a great way to meet people too. I have a lot of people I still call friends today, 20 years later, that I met selling them smokes. Didn't get rich, but it was a decent hustle. Sophomore year of high school, at the beginning of second semester, I ran a fucking juice box market around the school. It started when I packed an extra juice box in my bag one day, and I gave it to me friend Xavier. A few people asked me if I had another one, and my friend jokingly said, "Hey, I bet you could sell these and make a profit." And that's exactly what I did. I would bring about 12 to 15 juice boxes every day, all varying flavors. And they'd be gone by the end of the day. I sold the most in my third hour, and right after that was lunch, where I'd sell most of, if not the rest of them. At one point I'd had a spreadsheet of all the people who owed me money, and I made sure to get it all back. I legit gave the people on the spreadsheet code names just in case. I'd also sell things like sodas, and sometimes even Oreos, and I made a big profit. Within like 3 weeks I'd made about $70 all from selling these dumb juice boxes. I'd sell the juices for $0.50 and the sodas for $1. The Oreos, I more or less gave out. The only downside was that I had to be careful who I told about selling, cause while half the teachers thought it was the funniest fucking thing they'd ever seen, others would legit get on my case for selling food without a permit. Plus, hauling everything to school every day was not the best for the first few weeks, since I walked to school, but I got used to it after a while. All in all, it was a blast, and I made a giant profit. The only reason I had to stop was because the school year ended. Looking forward to doing it again, honestly. It was honestly a great way to meet new people. TLDR, I sold juice boxes in my classes, and it was fun as hell. The worst thing I can think of is this group of kids who would help kids disappear and run away in my high school, all services having to be paid for, of course. Costs ran $300+ depending on how extravagant it was. Some examples included making it seem to where a kid who was known for being seriously depressed had killed himself. I only know this because I'm friends with 2 of the closest friends to the guy. They know his home life is faked up, so they kept quiet, but the day before he died he left them a box full of the remaining memories he has with them, along with a note explaining what had happened. His car the next day was found on a bridge after he had filmed a video proclaiming he was going to kill himself on Facebook, but nobody was ever found giving fake IDs to a girl who hopped from train to train in different disguises to her destination, acting as a Muslim girl, wearing a hijab and darker foundation, not blackface, but this bitch was pale, so just a tanner foundation, and colored her eyebrows different colors with those pencil fingers. All supplies were given to her. This story's a bit more personal, but how I found out about them is because I was trying to run away from a faked up situation, and I tried paying one of the guys through a friend to get him to take me to Houston, since I had a pal there who was willing to take me under his wing for the few years I had until I no longer was a minor. I was in freshman year, and this guy was an online friend. So this fella who was part of the crew met up with me in person and told me that this was a faked up plan and tried giving me pills to knock out my parents at dinner to let me slip out of the house and get a decent ways on a Greyhound bus until I reached Chicago, being the #1 place for runaways. I told him I wasn't going to drug anyone and ended up just refusing to go back to my parents and hiding out a couple days at a friend's house until the cops found me. Back then in high school, when I was 16, I have been selling fake medical doctor's passes. I don't know if that's what it's called in English. It's when you get a sick day and the medical doctor gives you a document that justifies your absence at school for $10 per day with a stamp and a signature point. My uncle had a printing company and sometimes I would go help him out, and that one day I couldn't help myself but notice that he had been printing these medical passes. I stole a few stacks, each had like 100 passes, if I remember correctly. I was fortunate enough to have a color laser jet printer and a scanner at the time. The biggest challenge was to forge the serial number in the stamp. I cracked the serial number algorithm after a week of headache. Cracking forums for games helped me with that, as I was fascinated with cracking games back then. I knew something about that. The stamps were easier. I scanned the few original medical passes I had and hand carved a wooden mold from the scans for the stamps. I had 3 fake stamps from 3 different medical institutions in my city. And the signature was the easiest. I just practiced a few from legit medical doctors. Once everything was prepared, I remember I was scared to use them. They sure looked authentic though. I gathered my courage and I didn't go to school for one day. Gave my fake medical pass issued by me to my teacher, and surprisingly everything went fine. In a very short amount of time everyone was interested to buy. And I started selling. I would hear talks about myself in school from someone talking that someone is selling legit medical passes around. Then I got worried that I might get caught. And then I decided to sell to dealers. Instead me dealing. Those guys were usually the bullies in the schools. Gangster guys. Most kids feared them. I gave them an offer 50% profit for them from each medical pass. They just needed to fill in the name and 8. In 6 months I didn't knew what to do with the money I got. I got so much money for a 16 over 17 year old. I spoiled myself so much. I would throw money around my friends and they would collect them from the ground. I'd pay for everything around. Drinks, snacks, fast food, anything, you name it. I even bought them clothing and expensive shoes just because I could. I bought myself a motorbike, a car, and I started buying drugs and drinking on weekends like a fool and paid for high-class escorts. I started doing this when I was 2nd year in high school and went on till I was 4th year. Last year, in high school, I would steal a few stacks from my uncle's printing company and repeat the process. I always felt like I was gonna be caught one day, but I liked the thrill of that, and I didn't stop. I had to lie somehow to my parents, so even though I had more money than I ever needed, I still asked for money at home. So my parents wouldn't get suspicious for the bigger things that I bought, like a motorbike and a car. I bought them illegally and never brought them home. Cause how would you justify a few $1,000 worth motorbike to my dad? This really bothered me. I wanted to brag. For the smaller things like buying myself PlayStation and games, I lied that my friends have borrowed it for me. I almost got caught. I got so spoiled that once I didn't show up at school for 3 weeks straight. I started playing World of Warcraft at the time, and I would go out from home and directly go to the gaming center where I played WoW for 10 hours each day. For that much time of absence, the teacher acquired a phone call from the parents. An older guy from the gaming center, he was in college, with a grumpy voice, agreed to help me and call the teacher and pretend to be my father on the phone. It went well until my teacher got worried about me and called my home to ask my parents how I'm doing. I remember going home from the gaming center and my parents sat me and asked me where I have been and said, do not lie. I knew that they knew already. They were furious. They brought me to the teacher and the director of the school and we had a long talk about my behavior. I got off easy though, a few days in detention, and that my dad or mom would have to personally visit my teacher to justify any kind of absence for me from that point. The ironic thing was that after that stunt I pulled, I couldn't use the medical passes for me. I just sold them from that point on. I didn't get caught for selling fake medical passes because this time I didn't got the chance to give my teacher the medical pass. He called my house before I got the chance to do that. I was lucky about that point. After high school my parents sent me to university in another European country, in Italy, and that was the end of it. I thought of doing it there, but Italy was not the third world country I lived in before, and everything was computerized and not so easily fakeable, and of course, even if I found a way to hack the system somehow, which to me seemed impossible, I didn't add my uncle printing company there to get the original prints, and yeah, that was the end of it. The hardest part was getting used to being broke again and rely on my parents' money entirely after I burned out through my stash. And no, I didn't do anything illegal afterwards like that. After university, I went back home and got a job. A few years later I married, and we still laugh about the story with my friends when we gather. We were the jacks in town with that kind of money in our pockets. It was fun, but it was so stupid. If I got caught, who knows what I would have been charged with. I suspect my father would have disowned me if he learned about this raffle. Crazy stuff. Crazy young years. I got lucky. Started with selling yo-yos when they were popular amongst the 4th grade class. For some reason, the local comic book store carried some pretty unique, high quality yo-yos. Hardly anyone from my 4th grade class went to comic book store, so my secret supply was safe. The yo-yos I could supply were far superior than the standard Duncan yo-yos Walgreens sold, bad as yo-yos with bearings, killing the competition. Walk the dog for days. When the yo-yo craze faded out, we sold unique pens. Top sellers were that Parker Silver Bullet Jotter and that badass silver and black zebra pen that cops use in the movies. Also around that time, Jelly Roller pens were becoming popular. We had a teacher who was absolutely crazy for them, so all the kids she was tight with followed suit. We'd get them from the local Walgreens. This time, I enlisted the help of some kids in a couple of my classes. In hindsight, picking random kids to go into business with was a god-awful mistake and landed me in a bit of hot water. The recruits were stealing the pens and I would sell them. That's right, pushing hot Dr. Grips. Eventually, the principal caught wind of all my business endeavors and was less than pleased about my entrepreneurial spirit. Needless to say, she shut that sheet right down, and I was out to business. I think the only reason the opportunity existed was due to the fact that most of the 4th grade class lived on the other side of town, whereas I lived within walking distance of all these places and had a pretty generous allowance. TLDR. Sold yo-yos and pens in the 4th grade until I got busted by the principal. I sold a ton of born out of my truck. My dad is an auctioneer and I worked for him. When I was in high school we would liquidate business. So when we sold out a pawn shop or video stores that had born, he would box it up and sell it by the case. I was 16 and would pull our setup trailer to the sale sites and help get the sales ready. We live in the buckle of the damn Bible Belt in Missouri, so born was a taboo thing. The internet was slow as hell and there really wasn't free born. So I would just happen to load a few cases of VHS and DVDs into my trailer. I did pay for them. I would just write out a sales ticket with a fake number and pay what other people did, usually around $10-20 a case, probably 50 DVDs a case, and stockpile them in an old camper we had on the farm all summer. School rolled around and I was in business. I had a price sheet I printed out on our office computers. VHS was a set price of $10 each, but DVDs was where I made the money. I had them broken down to content, race, runtime, etc. point and priced accordingly. To our lesbian DVDs sold for $40 each. They were a big seller. That first year I probably sold 200 DVDs and a couple hundred VHS tapes. Made more money selling them than working all summer. I was even selling them to kids from other high schools. The next year I did the same thing, but got shut down a month into school when I got caught smoking pot before school. They searched my truck, and under my backseat I had probably 50 DVDs and 20 tapes. I got a 90-day suspension for the pot and an extra 10 days for the born. I also had to use my born money for an attorney to keep me out of jail for the weed and pay for alternative school classes, so I wasn't a semester behind. Point. The best part was I knew everyone's kinks who was secretly gay, who liked bondage stuff like that. I never would say anything about it or blackmail them with the info, and they knew that. It was just cool knowing that stuff about people. I had spent 7 hours a day with them and had gone to school with a lot of them for 11 years at that point, and until I started selling born I didn't really know any of them. Me and my 2 other close friends all decided I should drop $40 for a keylogger. After it came to my friend's house, because my parents are too snoopy for me to order it to mine, we decided to put it straight to work. We started getting the usernames and passwords of all our teachers at school, then realized that we had unrestricted access to the internet, aside from being able to change our grades, attendance, and disciplinary history. We gave out one teacher's password to some of our friends who we were cool with, but not as close with. Within 3 days over 300 people had logged into this teacher's account and the school district chalked it up to phishing emails. Well, we realized that people were crazy for these logins and didn't even realize that they could do anything with them other than get on Snapchat and Twitter and etc. We decided to sell logins for $15 a pop and set up a free website using Google Sites and had people just pay us money there so that everything was anonymous. We knew the passwords would just get reset almost every week, so we were worried about people paying once and sharing the login with their friends. The school never suspected anything other than phishing emails. We knew this because we were reading all of the emails sent out by our IT department to the teachers, and we made it to summer with just under $900 and spotless attendance, straight A's, and all of our ice disappeared like nothing had ever happened. Next year is our senior year and there is no telling how far we are about to take it. I bought a packet scroll last week. TLDR. We hacked our school, made a ton of money, and got away with it, and made it to summer with our school still thinking their teachers don't know how to recognize a phishing email. I have 2. First was when I was in high school. The local Chick-fil-A would sell students a chicken biscuit for $1. One kid went and bought 100 of them, sold them for $5 each, got away with it for a few days before admin shut him down. Said it violated the fundraising rules and he could get in big trouble. I think it really violated the void service company and school/kid could have gotten in big trouble. He got to keep the money though. Second one happened a few years ago in a middle school. This kid is brilliant. He started to draw pig faces on sticky notes. He had some name for them. I can't remember, so we'll call them piggies. So he started making 1,000 of these piggies. He then got his friends to trade them for small things, food, cards, pencils, etc. After a few days, everyone started to use his piggies as a currency. He would leave them around the school in piles for kids to find, put them in books, so on and so forth. Then he just stopped to see what happened. Kids found out he wasn't making any more, so they started to hoard the piggies, trying to get the largest collection and actually started to pay money for them. Once real money got involved, kids started to counterfeit piggies. Well, this kid had one secret about his drawings that made it hard to reproduce. He could tell which ones were fake. It all went to hell when he started charging kids $20 to teach them the secret to the piggy. Some small thing that made it real vs fake. At this point the school was obsessed over these things with actual money flying around, picking out the real piggies vs the fakes. It was become a mess. Then some stupid D-bag kid started to drawing piggies on the walls with marker to get the original creator in trouble. All piggies were banned. Everything was shut down. Og Piggy Maker spent some time on in-school suspension for taking money and causing such a disturbance. Always late to these. We had a family hustle going point. When I was a freshman in high school, it was when the Michelle Obama school food thing went into effect, so most of the sugary stuff was gone. I saw it as an opportunity to sell candy, soda, chips and whatever else. My sister was in middle school at the time, and I got her to do the same thing. My other sister was in like kindergarten, so she was too young, but when she hit 3rd grade I would get her biggest bags of mixed candy and she would sell the candy for $0.25 each. She would easily sell a bag a day sometimes. By 5th grade she was moving full-sized candy bars for $2 each. She is a senior in high school now with her own car she bought with candy money. She has a free period before the main lunch hour, so she takes orders for lunch from people who aren't allowed to go off campus and drives around to get their food and charges them $5 on top of what the food costs. She makes like $200-300 a week doing this. We had to really convince her in 10th grade to not sell drugs. We aren't 100% sure she doesn't, but she would be good at it if she did. Some kid in our school got fed up with the healthy cola they sold in the school canteen. It wasn't even bloody cola. It was some kind of non-fizzy fruit drink that didn't taste like cola, but was the same color, I guess. So he started running a fizzy drink empire in our school in year 7. It started off as a couple of multi-packs of Coke from his locker, and someone from each clique would buy one and share it around with their group of friends. But then he managed to get a few of his friends to get lockers so he could store stuff in there. By year 10th, he had an entire monopoly on fizzy drinks and sweets. A notepad went around the school and people would write down what they wanted, and he'd buy it depending on what the demand was for it. And he had distributors, and none of us knew who this guy was until year 11th, when the group of kids were busted because a parent heard about the school's massive Coke empire, called the school, and there was a massive drug bust in our school, you know. The adults all thought we were talking about cocaine, because we're from a dodgy area where drugs were a big thing. They pulled in a bunch of kids for drug tests, which came up positive, but that's an entirely different story altogether. It was weed, not cocaine, and they searched lockers, and when they found about 5 lockers stuffed to the brim with Coca-Cola, Sprite, Haribo and chocolate, they realized what was going on. Of course, it narrowed it down to 5 people, the 5 whose lockers were used. But who was the big boss out of them, I hear you ask? It's been 2 or 3 years and no one knows still. None of them grasped or anything. He's still completely anonymous all these years later. Edit. I'm assuming it's a he, but 2 of the lockers belonged to girls and there is a fair chance none of the lockers were his, so it might not have even been one of the 5. We genuinely just don't know. Our school had a strict healthy eating policy, and selling stuff in general was against the rules. I used to get a bus to school, and there was a conveniently placed Subway directly opposite my bus stop. I noticed that by buying cookies in batches of 12 for £3 and selling them on individually at their face value of 50p, I could effectively double my money. As my bus was early enough, the cookies were usually pretty fresh out of the oven and my bag contained some of the heat, making them still somewhat warm when I arrived at school. There were other kids selling sweets and chocolate bars at the time. However, their day-old Sainsbury's cookies or Kit Kat bars could not compare with my freshly made, usually still warm Subway cookies. I started off humbly, buying 12 most mornings, and usually selling most of them to my form class, and being out of stock by the first break. Word got round quickly though. More and more classes from my year caught wind of this, and would come to my form room every morning before school would start. Before I knew it, I was buying 96 cookies out of Subway every morning. The workers knew I would come in looking this many, and had a bag ready sitting behind the counter, awaiting my arrival every morning. I would grab a handful of spare cookie bags, and spend the bus journey bagging the cookies into pairs, otherwise they would get squashed together to form one thick cookie, impossible to cleanly separate. When it came to selling it on, at my peak I would sell all 96 by the time the school day started, making £24 profit every day, for an hour's work. It was an underground operation. Be me age 12, I'm friends with like everyone in the year including girls. Why I'm like the funniest person in the year. It starts when one girl I was friends with we'll call Ebony, similar to actual names. We were pretty close, since we both had crushes on each other in prep, kindergarten and Australia. She has a crush on my good friend we'll call Owen, similar to actual names. She asked me to go talk to him and tell her what she's saying, but here's a pitch. Owen has a crush on the girl I do to we'll call Alyssa, similar to actual names, so I need to help Owen ruin my chances while ruining his, so basically I need to pull threads on them so I'm okay, and so are they. I have a plan. Apparently Owen likes a competitive girl, so when I tell Ebony the plan she says she's got it. That lunch we go to the basketball courts. When they do the teams of 3 it's me, Alyssa, so I can increase chances, and Ebony. When our team plays Owens I take Josh, similar to actual names. Ebony takes Owen and Alyssa takes Sam. We win barely, and we all sit down and talk. Owen compliments Ebony and Ebony the same. But this business I have running is seen and exploited until year 6 camp, where everyone was happy including me. Alyssa takes note of my work for everyone and likes me for it, and at year 6 camp we do spin the bottle with all the cool and popular kids, but at the end everyone just kisses whoever they wish. My primary school was faked up, not gonna lie, but my work there was done. My legacy shall stay for all eternity. Since my high school had terrible lunch food, and a lot of people for whatever reason didn't qualify for free breakfast or lunch, many of us, including me, had to resort to bringing food from home, or just being scammed out of our money with the expensive vending machine which in no way were nutritional or filling. Lots of kids resorted to selling chips, candies, Gatorades, and sodas. May have been counterproductive with the nutritional side, but at least it was filling. My school would sell significantly smaller bags of chips, but the people selling would make their regular sized bags of chips the same price as the schools, so obviously people went with the better option. But people started getting creative, since lots of kids were getting caught, getting suspended and having the school threaten us saying, by doing this then no one will get free lunch and our lunch budget will be cut. These kids moved on from candies, chips, etc. to more homemade foods that can pass off as not selling, but bringing food to friends. They had duffel bags that were very noticeable when the bags of chips were heard, so Tupperware, plates, tinfoil, whatever in a backpack were not checked. This guy in my chemistry class sold breakfast burritos. He had a backpack full of them. They ranged from just beans, potatoes, chorizo with eggs, and my favorite chorizo with potatoes. I assumed he at least had maybe over 50, cause the burritos didn't take up much space, since all they contained was the tortilla, and whatever filling then wrapped in tinfoil. Every day, he would sell them, and was out of them by third period. Luckily, I had the class with him first thing in the morning, and sat right in front of him, so usually I got first dibs on whatever burritos I wanted. He sold them for $1 and they were delicious. His mom made the burritos every morning. I enjoyed the burritos very much, everyone did. Barely anyone qualified for free breakfast, and were given sugary options for breakfast, if they did pay, which most of the time tasted terrible. So this guy bringing his breakfast, he was a life savior, and saved us $0.50 if we bought breakfast from the school. They never had any hot food, just small stuff like a tiny as cup of cereal, a small yogurt parfait, a chocolate muffin, and a really cold honey bun. This guy started bringing the burritos around November, when it would get colder, so we were dying to warm up. My school had no hallways, just multiple buildings, so we were cold AF with no way make ourselves warm. As this was first period, the burritos were hot and fresh, and cannot stress this enough, delicious. We had actual nutritional, filling food when the guy started doing his business, and I will forever be grateful for that point. It's been like 3 years, and I'm still not over how good those burritos were. I ran 3, 2 at school, and 1 at church point at school. During 5th grade, the big thing were pencils with logos from NFL teams. Kids wanted one of every team available, and somehow I became the go-to for teams that nobody else could find. I would sell, or trade them for $0.25 each, but whenever I had a rare one, none of them were actually rare, but people would take packs apart in store to get certain ones for weird reasons. The other kids would almost start a bidding war to buy it off me. I think I sold one kid to Cowboys pencils for $5 at one point, which was kinda ridiculous. The other one I ran at school was handmade bookmarks. I'd twist up yarn into a short length and tie it off, and sell them for $0.10. They weren't even nice looking, but other kids would ask for really specific color combinations for a little extra, and then flip when I'd show up with it the next day. My mom taught art, so I had a really wide color range to choose from, but the other kids didn't know that. They just thought I was a yarn wizard or something. At church, though, we had what we'd call the bead trade. There were about 5 of us, and we'd bring a box of beads with us, and meet up after Sunday school right before service to look through, and trade them out. It served absolutely no purpose, because we were dorks, but if you had a glass bead, everyone wanted it. The bead trade ended fatefully one day when my sister accidentally kicked over her box during the sermon and beads went everywhere. It sounded like a 5-minute rain stick, interrupted the service, and cracked everybody up. We weren't allowed to bring beads to church anymore after that, lol. So one time I was in high school on this school trip. It was like this 11-hour bus journey or something. The popular people at the back were playing Truth or Dare. Me, sitting a few seats away from the back, could hear what they were saying. One of the girls said, "I dare you to have sex with me." The boy, who we later found out had a crush on her, was all for it, and immediately started the dare. There were these bunk bed things on the bus, so they got in the same one and went under the faking sheets. The bunk bed they were in was right above me. The noise was so disturbing for everyone on the faking trip that one kid started selling bath bags. Do not ask me where he got 50 plus bath bags. I'm not even joking, everyone on the faking bus bought one. One kid got his bag and climbed up to the bed where they were having sex. He wrapped his bag around the girl's face and threw her off the bed. Everyone agreed she was not allowed back in her seat for the whole bus journey. The boy was so embarrassed he stayed under the sheets for the whole journey and later would not get off the bus because he was so embarrassed. The worst part was the girl who was lying on the floor of the bus, who previously had been having sex with the boy, was fully naked. She was one of the hottest girls in the class, by the way. The kid who wrapped his bag around her head went down as a faking legend, and the boy who sold all the bags was rumored to have made $200 plus. I have no clue what the teacher was doing the whole faking time. They stopped playing truth or dare after that. My childhood best friend and I would sell Club Penguin accounts. Kids were stupid and didn't know how to make good passwords for their accounts, so we would log into a server and find penguins that were wearing the rare items and had bought the monthly membership. Then we'd spend however long guessing their password. We'd sell them for fake society money that you could use to buy prizes and cheat in class. Basically just Monopoly money that the teacher printed out. We'd sell accounts for $1,000-5,000 in class money. It was super easy. For example, I remember this account specifically for some reason. Username, ISARK1000. Password, ISARK. Just cheat like that. Best part was that Club Penguin would ban accounts that had 2 people logged in at the same time, so classmates would inevitably have to come running back and buy another. We would write receipts for these things and kept an entire little notebook logging all the shit that was sold, who it was sold to, for how much, and the person's signature next to it. We never got caught. Accumulated upwards of $150,000 class cash and used it all to buy a huge ball of tape at the end of the year that my teacher made after stripping his classroom of all the posters, etc. It was the size of my head, and to 3rd grade me the best use of all of my money. Lol. Teacher had no faking clue how I got so much money. Beside my black market business, I was a good kid, so he knew it had to have been legit. I recently reconnected with him on Facebook and I told him about the whole deal. He got a kick out of it. My buddies and I ran a homework/assignment ring in middle school and high school. We had 3 regular members and 2 other part-timers, and we would split the work depending on the subject. My friend would do math homework, another would do history research. Needed to do a project on a historical event? She would find the info you needed so you could put it together, and I would do anything English related. Our part-timers would split any extra work that we got. We ran some reasonable prices for our work. Math, $5 per worksheet per side. Advanced work, such as app or D classes, would be $10 per sheet per side. English, $5 per worksheet. $10 to proofread with edits. $15 to write a full paragraph for your essay. Some kids had trouble writing conclusion paragraphs, etc. We wouldn't write full essays for anybody. We didn't want to risk getting in too much trouble if we were caught. History, prices varied depending on the type of info needed for your project, what event, what types of sources, how detailed the info had to be, etc. My friend would determine the price from there. Cheapest rates ran at $10. The most expensive project she did the research for was $50, plus an extra $20, because it was a last minute deal. Part-timers, same prices as above, but they would only get the work that our main trio wouldn't be able to complete on our own. One of our part-timers specialized in chemistry, so she became a hot commodity for a lot of sophomores. We all graduated this past month, but our part-timers are still at the school. I think they are starting to run their own market until they graduate themselves. Basically just fizzy drinks, sweets and these bad boys. Slingy hand toys, they were great. You can either slap your friend sitting on the table a few seats away, or grab their paper. Worked great at that, or sling it and let go. It gets stuck to walls/rooftops, and eventually falls down after 5 minutes. People used to fling them at passing buses on the way to and from school. They were a nightmare. But There was a 20p vending machine like this 5-minute walk from the school by the local shop. Since I had a lunch pass, that allowed me to go home for lunch. I never went home. My mum signed it for me, so I could go to the shop for lunch. I used to buy a load of them 20p each as they sold for 50p/£1 at school. You put a 20p coin in, turned it and got your little egg. Inside was either a small slinky hand, 50p, value, or a larger one, far more in demand, that went for £1/£2. I didn't do it to try and turn it into a business, but could buy 5 for £1 dinner money and make x3 my money easily. Others sold cans of pop, sweets. The later in the day for some reason the more valuable a drink would be, so you could buy a bottle/can of pop for 50p at first break and sell it near the end of the day for £1.30p. Cost at the shop. Energy drinks would sell easily for £1 last period. Nothing really big, but here are 3 minor ones. A kid found a bunch of Pokemon cards hidden away in a corner. He started selling them, and I managed to get some good ones since I was there when he found them. I became the most popular guy in class because of my Pokemon cards, until the next day when the real owner of those Pokemon cards was revealed. It was a Winnie kid that nobody liked, and he got them banned. The 6th graders went to a museum where, if you did some special thing, you would get a pin. Most of the kids were too lazy to do that special thing, but still wanted a pin. Some guys, including me, started a black market of those pins, and soon a lot of other kids joined. I remember it was $5 a pin. Most of the kids did the old trick of saying thing in the way of, "Oh, I don't have the money today. I'll pay you tomorrow," and didn't pay the next day. Then the teachers banned them, and you couldn't have those pins to school. Once I bought a sheet load of chewing gum. I decided to give some to my friends at school. Chewing gum was not allowed in my school, so we had to be sneaky. Soon other people wanted gum too, but I refused. I ended up getting a soda can, a packet of cough drops, and $4 before I was out of gum. Not kids, but still relevant, I think. We had 25 or so teachers in our HS small school. I know about 7 or so teachers would sell different snacks and drinks at prices lower than vending machines. Candy, chips, sodas, pretty much anything. 20 ounces soda was $0.75. Pack of Skittles were $0.50. Really good prices. Of course it wasn't all junk food. Some had homemade food like tamales, sub sandwiches, salads. Way healthier and better than cafeteria crap. Well, the school itself was losing money from the vending machines and school lunches, which, let's be honest, were barely food. They outlawed selling stuff like this in any building directly connected to the cafeteria. This was 90% of the school, and the last 10% was one classroom, the locker rooms for sporting events like football and baseball, and the ag barn. So, since the teachers couldn't sell in that building anymore, they all organized either selling out of the one classroom separate from the rest of the school, or simply selling under the nose of the school admin. The shop teacher had built a full stop into his desk which flips up and shows the goods like a bunch of guns in a trunk of a dealer. Our art teacher would distribute stuff in old paint cans. One math teacher went above and beyond with dead drops for money and food. Hardcore stuff like meeting under bleachers and sending codes. My favorite was my gov and eco teacher. He had a large cabinet in his classroom that was notoriously difficult to open. Only he knew the trick. He had pretty much everything under the sun in there and pulled the most money each week. Most he gave to random eekers in the school, but he had students all day coming to his classroom buying stuff. When we asked about breaking the rules, he would throw some stuff about fascism and oppression of the governed. He was a freaking genius. Even had a webcam outside his classroom so he could tell if any member of the administration was coming. TLDR teachers sold snacks and drinks. School said no more. Teachers still did it, but got really sneaky about it. I went to a correctional boarding school called the Advent Home for about 6 months, and there was a huge market for food. The place enforced a completely vegan, low to no sugar diet on us. It was bad. Kids made candy by cutting open tubes of toothpaste and letting it dry. There were 2 spots where we could get good food on campus. A closet where they kept snack foods like chips and granola bars and fruit snacks that they served to the parents when parents came over once every 3 months. This closet was largely inaccessible, and so someone only ever got food out of it twice. Once when a staff member accidentally left it open, and another time when 4 kids stole a car to run away. They broke into the closet and stuffed a duffel with food. Before leaving the other spot was inside the staff section of the actual school building. The staff got free sweetstuffs from a local Panera Bread. They kept it in that building under lock and key. However, I was a pretty well-behaved kid there and managed to land a cleaning job in the school. While cleaning the staff building, I'd get a fresh trash bag and stuff a few sweeter tuffs in it, cookies, cinnamon rolls, that sort of thing, making sure to not take so much that it would be conspicuous, then tie it off and toss that bag into the larger one where I collected all the school's trash. Afterwards I'd finish my rounds in the school and throw the trash in the dumpster and go to rec. Finally, I'd notify one of my dorm mates of the cash in the dumpster and have them act as a gopher for me to get it out of the dumpster and into the dorm, so as not to risk getting caught myself, and as recompense I'd give them a piece of the whole point. Most of the time I'd just keep whatever I got, but sometimes I'd trade it for regular foodstuffs that I liked, such as tortillas, or the chocolates out of the Special K that was sometimes served, usually just 3 bowls of the stuff at breakfast. First come first serve. Everyone else got to eat plain Cheerios, or whatever garbage they had. I also gave it to one of the student dorm leaders as a birthday gift once, because he'd had my back on multiple occasions before when other kids were bothering me. There were a few other items that people tried getting their hands on, like weed, but food was always the biggest item for everyone. Well, I'm currently doing this now. It started when I was in 8th grade. My old school used to do thing weekly candy sale thing and kids would flock in with money to spare. It hit me 2 years later that, well, I could do this, since the school snacks are healthy bullshit and no one sells candy. A little backstory, I also used to sell pillows in 8th grade, where I'd sneak into the home ec room, use their supplies and make them. This made me lots of money, and I used said money to buy the candy. I started after February vacation, and I made sure everyone knew I was selling. I started out with Skittles, Starburst, and some Airheads because those sounded like good starting items. My first day I made some money, but it wasn't too much. But the next day, when people heard about people actually buying candy in school and bragging about it, well, they wanted in. That day I sold basically my whole stock and made double what I invested. I made it a point to make 200% profit margin. Then I invested into chocolates the next week, Reese's, Snickers, Three Muskers, etc. Wouldn't you know it? That sold out in a week as well. I would put all of my money I made into candy, and it was guaranteed to double. After 2 weeks I started selling Gatorade, the big ones, for $1.50, and iced tea for $1. By the way, everything I sold besides the Gatorade was $1. Can't beat a cheap. This got me in line with upperclassmen, who started buying Gatorades for football practices and gym. Soon everyone at my school knew me as the candy dealer, some calling me El Chapo or Candyman. You don't know how good it feels to walk home with over $50 in your pocket every day from something that wasn't drugs. Well, at the start I also knew I had to keep this on the down low, as teachers don't like it when your class is disrupted by someone trying to buy a Kit Kat from a candy lord. So I had this huge lunchbox, technically a cooler, and I would walk around with product every day, never leaving it unguarded. Teachers would think nothing to it, because it was commonplace for students to walk around with lunch boxes. I'm bringing it back next year, and since now everyone has jobs and actually has money, why more people are gonna buy from me, as well as me changing up the menu a little bit, I'm basically gonna run the school. And to those who are curious, I made definitely over 1k that few months. Black market runner here. Some context, I lived in an area for a few years that operated in between poor areas and rich areas, so we had a weird mix of a lot of really low income kids, myself included, and really high income kids. One thing that kinda operated during elementary school was the rich kids bringing fancy snacks with them to lunch, like Nutter Butters and the such. Since this school was really concerned with the preservation of we're all equal, at a certain point they ended up banning students from bringing them. Safe to say, kids were mad. Now, more context, but the school campus was at one point under construction, but they kinda just gave up I guess. So in our huge field there was a huge pile of cinder blocks just lying around that kids would play around in, and would kinda slowly smash smaller rocks against to try and break the blocks down. The teachers never stopped us. I had a great idea, work with some of the richer kids, who were already getting the snacks from their parents, and sell the snacks. I promised them a cut of the income, and we stored the snacks in the cinder blocks. We assigned at least one person during lunch to hide in another part of the playground, so no one would know where the stash was kept, and sell the snacks for like $1 each. Once the teachers picked up on the situation, I promised everyone involved all the money, as long as I wasn't ratted out as the ringleader. 10 years later and no one ever found out. Beach. I was the one who ran Airpoint in 6th 9th grade. I sold energy drinks of every variety out of my locker at a profit, along with caffeine pills, chocolate covered coffee beans, caffeine gummies, anything to make your heart buzz. Most kids in my school weren't allowed caffeine by their parents or just needed the rush of doing something daring. I found those kids and set up my market. My returning clients were always either the very studious and quiet kids who needed something to keep them awake after working through the night, or the polar opposite demographic. Loud-mouthed popular guys who hung around the school throwing their crushed cans onto the roof. I would later go on to be the middleman between alcohol suppliers and high school parties, ran a designated driver service, and briefly sold weed after I quit my job to move to New York City for school, and I wanted to save up cash with little time investment. And I was just the tiny blonde girl who was friendly, but kept to herself most of the time. I was friends with everyone, but close to no one. My teachers thought I was bright but uninspired. None of them suspected I had already found my calling as a conman. A kid I knew in 6th grade started something called the lockbox. He bought lockers from people who didn't use theirs and then sold them to people who needed extra space. My friend never used his locker. He could hardly get it open. I knew his combination because one time he needed help opening it and mine was close by. So I thought since my friend didn't his we could sell it. I talked to the kid. He was glad to have business. Next day I tell my friend about it. He was a bit reluctant, but eventually agreed, as long as it was a high price. So I take the kid to my friend's locker. My friend wasn't there. Open it up for him. I didn't give him my friend's combination. The kid says, if he's going to buy it, he wants to step inside it. The kid is short, but a little plus size. He fits in, to my surprise, and asks me to close the door. So he's stuck in there. A few seconds later he asks me to let him out. I eagerly put in the combination, but the door doesn't open. I try again, no luck. A crowd starts to form. Somebody offers help, but he'd need the code and I didn't want to give it to him, because it's my friend's locker. After a few more tries I ask him to lean back, and then it finally works. 2 days later the kid getting stuck in his locker comes up in class. My friend looks at me with a face that said, this kid can't be taken seriously. I don't want him with my locker. I then tell that it was in fact his locker. He had a look of surprise, anger, and confusion all at once. The next year lockers were no longer assigned. You had to apply for one. Had a friend in high school who had this magical ability to make everyone think he was cool. He was super academic, a total nerd, but had this level of charisma that made him untouchable. He was a super nice guy. If anything he felt a little unfeeling and businesslike sometimes. Either way, everyone knew him, and he made it his business to know everyone. He was insanely smart too. He made up an entire game show style game called Exile. It had incredibly complicated rules, but it was fun as hell. We'd play it on the bus to and from marching band competitions. It became so successful that the entire school started playing it, and I think at one point there was actually a large bracket. Not exactly a black market, but this kid ran the school. Not only that, but one year he recorded an entire Christmas album. Just him, singing Christmas songs. He produced like 100 copies. He even made an album cover of him wearing a robe, sitting in an armchair in front of a fire. He set up a desk in front of the cafeteria and sold them. He and I were good enough friends that I got a copy for free, but he actually sold every copy and then had to make more. I still have mine. If you're reading the slogan, you're a badass. Tobacco point. I went to a military boarding school. Tobacco was strictly prohibited, but since it was mostly reform students, almost everyone smoked or dipped. Point. I got in trouble with the law early on and was sentenced to do community service. Every day after school, I would collect my keys from the staff and drive to an after-school program for troubled youth. Basically, young kids, 1st 5th grade, from the ghetto whose parents were still at work right after school. It was free through the Founders Church, though not in a church. Once all the kids left, 2 to 3 hours later, I would return to campus and turn my keys back in. Point. Very soon, all the other students learned that I left every day and could go to the store. The kids who would sell dip, $7 to $10 a can for what is worth $1 to $4, would come to me during school and hand me hundreds of dollars in cash and a list. I would buy between 10 and 20 sleeves of dip, smuggle them back onto campus, and they would give me a sleeve for free. They made a fat ton of money and I used tobacco for free. Point. I did this for almost 2 whole school years and never got caught. I did get caught with a single can of dip a few times, but the punishment was usually just a couple penalty tours. One tour equals 50 minutes of marching with a rifle, back and forth, in a straight line, and occasionally a weekend in the mountains, which was actually fun. Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas. Back when I was in middle school, my buds and I figured out how to delete the school's blocker off of our personal laptop. Of course everyone else was dying to have access to any site and YouTube video. We charged $5 per person to inspect their computer. Another guy in my friend group got GTA, sat on his flash drive, and we started charging an extra $5 to have it put on people's computer. After a month, pretty much half the school was playing it, and inevitably someone got caught. Point. Nobody listened to the school announcements until the day the ad guy got on it stating he's tracking down and expelling the people distributing the game. I remember freezing up while several of my classmates immediately looked at me. Before the end of the announcement, I deleted everything involving that game off my laptop and didn't say a word about it since. In the end I never got caught, but the original guy who downloaded it did, because he was stupid enough to attempt to change his grades in the online grading system. All in all, I made over $500 from that scandal, and I'd most definitely do it again. TLDR, sold GTA, made money, it got way out of hand, but didn't get caught. Not necessarily black markets, but growing up my class specifically developed a lot of weird trends and were pretty resistant to having them shut down. I remember in middle school kids started wearing rubber bands around their wrists to carry around and snap them against other kids' skin, shoot them across the classroom at each other, etc. Eventually half of the 8th grade was doing it, and it got pretty disruptive. Finally the trend died down once a friend of mine got in school suspension for shooting one at another student and getting reported. In high school, ketchup bottles got removed from the cafeteria and replaced with ketchup packets. Of course, you need a lot of those tiny packets to have enough ketchup to dip in, so kids started taking multiple handfuls for themselves or their table before the packets ran out. Due to this, the cafeteria began to allow only 2 ketchup packets per person. After that, kids started trading ketchup packets for food or money, and some even brought in ketchup bottles from home to pass around. I was one of them. Eventually the 2 only rule was lifted because school didn't want us bartering over them, but the lunch aides would still yell at you if you took an egregious amount. Later during junior year, another trend began where kids started attaching zip ties to others' bags and lockers and whatnot. Some found it annoying, but it was mostly just a harmless prank. However, the school caught on and banned zip ties from being brought in as they saw it as a form of bullying. My class adapted and switched from zip ties to clothespins. Clothespins also banned. Then we switched to something we called getting spooned, where you would try to slip a spoon into someone else's pocket without them noticing. Eventually someone did this to a teacher and got reported for sexual harassment. All spoons removed from the cafeteria. It was wild. So yeah, my class got into a lot of shenanigans, but it sure made things more entertaining. Back when I was in grade 6 in my home country, I figured that the retail price for flavored milk cartons were around $0.50 at the time, per pack of 8. But I can refill the whole pack for a full $1 with the vendors that sit around the school gate. If I sell individual carton, I would be able to sell them at around 20 cents. Total sales would be $1.60. Solid 120% ROI. These vendors would of course add ice or mix it with shaved ice and resell them back to students at whatever price that they charge. Thus began a string of asking my mom to buy milk cause I really like them and also cause they have good nutritions. I didn't want to cause any dispute/conflicts between my sources, so I'd visit different vendors each day. It was a good grade 6. Made so much cash, I'd treat myself to ice cream/iced coffee, or take my friends over to the PC cafe and play CS 1.6/Quake/GTA Vice City/Lego Racing, or SC Brood, where I had to stop this neat operation cause my family moved to a new city. So began another venture in grade 7 in the new city, where I made good money off of selling hentai manga and aujinshi. Didn't last long though, cause the local newspaper somehow found out and posted an article about Japanese cartoon born polluting young minds at XXXXXXXX middle school. Still decent returns. Gum was illegal in my school. They thought it was too distracting. My dad owned a grocery store that I would help out at on Sundays. Every Sunday I would take 5 to 10 packs of various gum and sell them throughout the week for $1 a piece or $2. If I didn't really like you, I learned eventually I could just get the big packs of Orbit to maximize profits, and I'd easily make $20-30 every day at school just selling gum. This went on for 2 years before someone ratted me out because I wouldn't sell them my last piece that I was saving for myself after a long day of gum hustling. They suspended me for a week and tried to shut down my entire operation. They wouldn't stop me. I started selling whole packs to my friends for discounted prices before school, so they could in turn sell it at school instead of me. I got to the point where I'd make $40-50 a day. As a 14-year-old, I was living the dream without any actual risk of getting caught because I did all my business before school started, and my gum peddlers did the rest during school. They made money, I made money, it was a win-win. I was like the gum drug lord. Everyone in the school knew me. I was on top of the high school food chain. Eventually they just got rid of the gum ban because it clearly wasn't working, and my business slowly died out. But not before I made high school rich and famous. When senior year rolled around and we did that yearbook where will they end up in 10 years thing, they voted me for being in jail. Go figure. Not really a black market. My family used to take me to this Vietnamese mall in Southern California. Great place with awesome smelling food and bootlegs as far as the eye could see. Just like every other kid my age, I fucking loved Dragon Ball Z, DBZ, and I found this toy that was kind of like Rock M Sock M Robots, but instead of boxing you had an arena stage, these pegs on sliders, and an assortment of miniature DBZ characters in battle poses. To play with the toy you would put the characters onto one of the twee pegs and push a button on either side to make the peg move forward and twist so it looked like the characters were rushing towards each other and fighting. Anyways, I loved this toy and I was having trouble making friends in school because I only spoke Vietnamese at the time. So I brought my toy over for show and tell day and everyone had fun playing with it, but you could only bring your own toys to school on show and tell days, so my popularity was only guaranteed on that special day. Until I found a windbreaker with a biggest chest pocket. Every morning for a week I would wear the same biggest windbreaker with that biggest chest pocket and cram as many DBZ toys and the arena stage into it and go to school. And I would pull that sheet out during recess and we'd have a DBZ fight club on the playground playset. It started out as good old violent fun until the bets started. I don't know who started it, but I vividly remember kids putting down pennies and quarters and maybe even a dollar bill down on different DBZ characters. Unfortunately, this all ended within the week, and one of the playground monitors told me I couldn't bring that toy onto the playground, probably because I'd probably lose all the pieces in the sand. Anyways, that's how I started a playground fight club with included gambling. In preschool, we had a French club, and every couple months or so they'd sell French candy for fundraising for some trip or something. Well, the only candy of the 5 types that they sold that really mattered to everyone was bonbons, some sort of chewy fruity tasting thing. Basically kids learned what class hour the French club restocked the kids and you tracked one down before they sold out point. So my dad works at a restaurant supply business. And he was in very good standing at the company. Over dinner I was telling him about this candy rush and he remarked, "Oh, bonbons. Yeah, we stock those. WW have like 10-pound cases a client can order." So I asked the price per unit and he was like, about 30 cents a bag or so. The French club sold them at $1.50 a bag. Point. I asked my dad, "Can you order a case yourself?" He replied he could, especially as he was in such good standing, as I guess there were some people really abusing it in the past. So he ordered a couple cases and I opened my shop at $1 a bag. It was easy to pay my dad back for 4 case price at that margin, and was able to pocket the rest. This went on for most of my senior year, as I single-handedly undercut the entire French club monopoly. Point. They tried to get me by saying I can't sell during school cause of blah blah blah. So I just conducted business before and after hours made almost $2K over the course of the year. My son was making close to $200 a day selling caramel apple pops for $3 each, but as high as $10. It sounds like early on he was only taking a small quantity to school and selling them to the popular friends. Eventually, it was like a status symbol to have these lollipops hanging out of their mouths. Even a couple of teachers were buying them. He was taking bags of 50 to school every day for a few weeks and selling out of these fakers. They taste amazing, but are pretty obscure and generic, so nobody really knew where to get them. He had a few kids show up with Tootsie Roll Pops and Blow Pops to sell, but nobody wanted those. They just wanted these caramel apple pops. Eventually, another kid wised up and Googled it and was able to track them down. The kid showed up to school and started slinging these things one Monday. By Tuesday my son and the kid had gotten into a major fist fight. The 7th grade had begun to factionalize, and they were both suspended for fighting. That's when the lollipop empire came crashing down. They were no longer allowed to sell anything at school or they would face another suspension. If I had to guess, he made well over $2,000 selling those bastards. He bought me a pair of Jordan 11 basketball shoes for Christmas that year. I don't even wear sneakers. He just thought that would be a cool gift for me. I knew that he was selling them while he was doing it, but I didn't realize to what extent. I thought he was selling some and sharing the rest with his buddies. If I had known, I would have let him do it, but I would have asked him to scale it back, and of course, I would have nipped it in the bud at the first sign of trouble or distraction. Pixie sticks. Yeah, faking pixie sticks. This was the mid-90s, and around 4th/5th grade. The father of a kid on our bus ran a string of gas stations. His father would give this kid a ton of candy to give out to his classmates and friends. So he'd hand out free candy to us on the bus and in class. We are talking Tootsie Pops, Jolly Ranchers, etc. It was pretty dope. But one day he comes on the bus with a giant backpack of these off-brand pixie sticks. These pixie sticks were in giant plastic tubes, not the paper sheet. And they were the best. He even had chocolate flavored, which were everyone's favorite. Point. Now I don't know how he got so many pixie sticks, but this dude was getting giant, rubber banded bundles of about 50 pixie sticks for each flavor and bringing them on the bus in multiple backpacks. They became so popular that he came up with an idea and roped about 5 of us in on a business deal we couldn't pass up. He would come on the bus with bundles of pixie sticks, give them out to us, we'd sell them in the halls or on the playground, then collect money at the end of the day. We'd get a cut every time for how much we'd sell. I think we'd sell like 10 for $3. We had a good thing going, and one day he shows up without the pixie sticks. Tells us he's all out, and his father stopped selling them at the stations. We never got caught. The bus driver didn't seem to give a fuck, and it'll always be one of my favorite memories as a kid. Remember those stupidly sour candies called Warheads? In elementary school they were banned, probably for good reason, after kids were tricking each other into eating them, or purposely eating them, and causing a ruckus, while riding that sour dragon straight to hell. Point. We had one real candy store in my, back then, small town, and they even got them to stop selling the things. My uncle though ran a pizzeria a few towns over, and they sold candy. They sold Warheads. I took a bag to school, and my friends immediately asked for one. Word got around that I had some, so I started selling them for a quarter a piece. My uncle loved me to death and was kinda a shyster in his own right, so when I told him what had happened, he gave me case point. I jacked the price to 50 cents, 3 for $1. Had a backpack full of them, even taped a bunch to the inside of my shirt, because I was cool like that. For a month or so I cleaned up before a teacher saw me with a few and wrote me up just for having them in school. Luckily she didn't see my stash point. That was enough to shook 4th grade you/full faith and credit, so I shut down operations. Today I'm ripped on for never breaking the smallest of laws, always playing by the rules, but I guess kid me fancied himself a gangster. Dad probably shouldn't have made me watch Goodfellas all those times. Funny thing is I hated those things. Tried one once and almost threw up. Point never get high on your own supply. Oh man. I've been waiting to tell this story. In middle school, they let the students run the cafeteria registers at the snack bar. It's a walk-up window where you could pay cash for lunch, snacks, drinks, etc. Why you would let 11 and 12-year-old kids run transactions is beyond me. So one of my fellow 7th grade buddies, we'll call him Tony, worked at the cafeteria, behind the register. He gets his smart idea and recruits his small circle of friends, including me, into the plan. So the deal went like this. Say, you would give him $1 for a cookie, he would take the cash and give your cookie and $2 as your change. You just made $1 profit. Tony would essentially steal money out of the register to give out a slightly larger amount. Essentially we made a profit and scored free food whenever we wanted. The more food you bought, the more money we would make. A $10 lunch could easily get flipped into $15 to $20 in free food. Multiply that by 5 or 6 kids multiple times a day, and we were pulling maybe like $50-60 on an average day. After school we would meet up and pool our earnings and divide them equally among us. Tony took a bigger cut than all of us because of the risk he was taking, which we didn't have a problem with. I mean, we were all getting money and free food. It was straight up stealing, but looking back, extremely well executed and organized. Eventually, I started feeling super guilty about it. I knew it was wrong, and I stopped stealing. I actually spent all the money I made in our hustle back at the cafeteria with different cashiers and bought a ton of food. That was my way of giving the money back. Tony never got caught and stopped working at the cash register when we got to 8th grade. But this went on for months, easily. Middle school is a faking weird time. In 8th grade I sold Charms Blow Pop lollipops for 25 cents each. I was buying them in bags of 14 for 69 cents each. It only took 3 sold to break even on a bag, and I was selling 3 to 4 bags worth a day. This went on for a couple of months before the school ended up banning all inter-student candy sales or trades, because I was selling enough to start being an issue. In junior year in high school I started selling Born. This was long before the internet, so Born was actually difficult for high school students to get. But since I've always looked older than I had no problems buying magazines or renting movies. I would sell Playboy and Penthouse for $10 an issue. Cover price at the time was around $5, and I would sell duplicates of movies for $20 per tape of 3 movies, their choice of any 3 from my collection. I was renting the movies at a local video store on their 2 for Tuesday promotion. $3 for 2 videos. The Born business I kept more low-key, so the school either never caught on or ignored it because they didn't want it publicly known. I continued until I graduated the following year. I was well known enough from the blow pops selling in 8th grade. There were still jokes made about it my senior year as they started doing retrospectives leading up to graduation. Well, I was a part of most of them at my school. Most of the others were candy, energy drink, test answers, homework answers, basic sheet. My very first one was a loan shark job. A friend of mine would loan out say $5, and if you didn't pay back within 2 days, it would double. Then at the end of the week, it would double the double. And every week like that. Plus 20% interest, beach. I knew the exact amount because I was his accountant. A funny story on the loan shark thing. I actually had a guy come to me asking for a loan of $10. since that was a high amount compared to most, and because I knew how rough the loan shark gets when it's higher amounts, I made sure to ask why and if he was sure. He was trying to start another candy market. Point you wouldn't know, but at my school, it was extremely hard to start and keep a candy market going due to the large amounts of them. They were the most popular. I ran it by the loan shark, and he was very happy. I mean, you could see the gleam in his eye. Point the next day, the guy who took out the loan made nearly nothing, and same thing the day after a few weeks and constant small payments. This boy was about $30 deep in debt and making nothing. Point the boy had to do so many favors to get that debt paid off. I ran the gum trade during middle school. 25-cent packs would go for 75 cents to $1 depending on how many addicts lined up. The money flowed well until a girl in my class ratted me out because she didn't get my last available pack one day. Then when HS hit, I ran the bootleg CD and mixtape racket since I was one of the first with a CD burner. Started out doing $8 a pop, then by the time I was a senior others had burners but were too lazy, so I still got the same amount of business while charging $5 a piece. I'd do cover art and track lists, so quality bootlegs, if I must say. From students to teachers, my customers were never ending. So much money made, as for example, if a new Eminem CD dropped, I'd be rolling into school with like 40 copies of that alone. For the next week straight. Napster and LimeWire were heaven back in the day to a bootlegger like myself. I'd have product to sell before it even hit official release dates. Also, my school inadvertently bailed me out during my criminal ways. One day during low cross practice, someone broke into my locker and stole a few hundred, the day's illicit profits, and the school actually reimbursed me. Then my criminal ways stopped for a few years. But then I found myself living the Van Wilder life in college, so I had a few years to become a booze kingpin. Didn't sell to randoms, just people I see on a daily basis, and therefore can personally vouch for knowing they're not sheetheads that'll land me in jail. I would have daily orders for $500 to $1,000 from the beer distributor, along with another $500 to $1,000 from the liquor store. Needless to say, my car was packed nightly lol, but it was only ever an hour-ish of work, so the payoff was well worthwhile to supplant the summer job funds that I had to make last throughout the school year. I was in a fraternity and also the social chair, aka party planner, so I'd just tell the employees that for my cover, and all was good. They'd just think we threw massive parties nightly. Had gotten to be first name basis with the employees, and since they saw me so often, they'd even set aside promotional swag from the booze companies for me. And also set aside cases of laddie for me if they saw their stock running low. Lol. That enterprise lasted a few years without any hiccup, but then finally ended my last year during one Easter break when the school was basically a ghost town. Had scooped a bottle for my over 21 friend, but he was in the shower when I went to drop it off, so he sent his underage roommate to meet me outside and grab it. And during the exchange there was an undercover cop who witnessed it. He stopped the guy, but I'm in my car and just bolted. Lol. 2 weeks later, they finally tracked me down and knock on my door. I got a summons for supplying minor. But overall it was no biggie, because after selling thousands upon thousands of booze, I only got caught for selling a single bottle. The fine was only a few $100, and my record was clean after doing community service plus paying, so I just looked at it as the man getting a tax off my venture. 100% true story. When I was in middle school, our neighbor was working at the local soap factory. One ingredient of soap is citrus acid, the same sour stuff you find on Sour Patch Kids. It looks like a white, kind of grainy, kind of powdery substance. Think of a mix of powdered sugar and regular sugar. Now Keith, our neighbor, used to bring us 10-pound barrels of this every month. You may not think so, but it's really hard to eat through 10 pounds of that stuff in a month. My parents eventually got sick of keeping so much of it at our house. We were told to either find a way to get rid of it, or they'd tell Keith no more. So I hatched a plan. I split up what I had into different amount baggies, 2 TBSP in one 1/4 cup in another, etc. I then started selling it at school. It was only $1 or $2 for each bag, nothing crazy. But my god did I make bank. In the first month I made about $150. For a poor kid in the 8th grade, this was incredible. Eventually some parents started to wonder what was happening to their kids' lunch and snack money. One kid's mother in particular was super tough on her kids. Adam, we'll call him, was eventually bullied by his mom into telling on my little black market. He showed her what he was buying. Jump forward a couple days and I get called down to the principal's office. I knew why, so I gave my citrus acid to my friend and headed for the office. Boy was I in for a surprise. I walk into her office and there stands my mom, Adam's mom, the principal, and 2 police officers. My first thought was, what the fuck are the cops doing here? My mom gives me a stank eye, like I've never seen before, nor seen again. The principal starts talking. She's going on and on about how disappointed she is in me, how she's never seen this before, etc. I'm obviously confused. Finally one of the cops, Officer Jeff, cuts in. He says that they know I've been selling cocaine to the other students and he's there to arrest me and my mother. My mom, now beyond pissed, lays into me. I deny it. I confess everything about my little black market and tell them exactly where my stash was with my friend Phil. The other cop walks down and grabs Phil, ensuring he doesn't empty his pockets. When he gets there they search him, find my citrus acid, and put it down on my principal's desk. My mom bursts out laughing. I've never seen nor heard her laugh so hard in my life. She stands up, looks at the cop, and says, "Does that look like cocaine to you?" He says it does. She's shocked. She asks him to taste some. He refuses. She insists he tries some, promising up and down it's not cocaine. He again refuses. This goes on for like 5 minutes. Eventually my principal steps in, reaches into the bag, takes a pinch of the citric acid, and drops it in her mouth. This wasn't a small pinch either. And remember, this citric acid was the pure stuff, not mixed with anything. No other candy to lessen the sourness. Almost immediately she makes the good old sour face, but worse because she was not expecting it to be sour. She looked at the cops and said, "Yeah, that's not cocaine. That's a warhead." She later told us she was expecting to either get high or for it to be sugar, but she didn't want me to get arrested if it actually wasn't cocaine, so it was worth the risk. After a couple-day investigation to prove I never once claimed it was drugs, when I sold it, everything was let go. The cops delivered pizza to my family as an apology. Yay, small towns. Adam's mother? She never said a word. Never once apologized for accusing me, and by proxy my mother, of selling cocaine to middle schoolers. We eventually donated all the citrus acid we had to the culinary teacher who used it for many years to help teach her class to make candy. And that's the story of how my little 8th grade black market nearly landed me in juvie back in the mid-90s. 6 years ago, my first year of high school, when our school first implemented iPads, one game everyone played was the Injustice game. It was hard to unlock decent characters and also super expensive, so I decided to go digging online, found a save file with basically an endless amount of in-game currency. I overdid my save file, and to my shock it worked. I had millions of in-game currency. I did the math, and it was around 4,000 Australian dollars I had in-game currency back then. I was worried of getting in trouble, so I kept it quiet, but it wasn't long till I started bragging to my friends about all the cool characters I had. They then started begging me to do it for them too, taking a bunch of people's iPads home, and then doing the process over and over again would have been a hassle, so I thought of another way. If I make an iCloud account, sync my Injustice save file and log into other people's iPad, it might also override their save file and also give them a bunch of in-game currency, which I tried, and it worked perfectly. Not long after, half the school is coming to me begging me to hack Injustice for them too, and that's when I got the idea of charging for my service. I was only charging about $2 and made about $90. One outcome I did not see coming is kids managed to sync a bunch of their personal stuff towards the iCloud, including photos, notes, contacts, and most likely other stuff. Once I find out, I changed the password and never logged into that iCloud account again. I've been curious at times, but I know for the best I should not log into that account. At my elementary school, there was a thing called Starbucks. The STARE was an abbreviation for something like responsible, respectful, etc. Anyways, they were like tickets that could grant you stuff like toys, teach with the pet teacher, do the announcements, etc. They were given to you when you solved a hard problem, helped people, etc. But the best was at the end of the year there was this really big school carnival, at least how I remember it, that the currency to play was the Starbucks tickets. Yet people always stole them from each other and stuff until there was this kid. Let's call him Jimmy. Jimmy was a boy who had access to a printer at his house. Not many of us had thought of it, and he would print the Starbucks with the same papers that the school used. He would take a bunch of the scratch paper. Yet it wasn't that easy. Each year, they would switch colors due to that reason. Yet Jimmy made a bunch of them. He was also a good kid, so it wasn't surprising that he had bunch. Our school had a bunch of teachers and had 4 different classes like middle school. The day before the carnival, he would bring like tons, and I mean like tons of Starbucks. He would sell 25 of them for 50 cents. There was literally half the 4th grade kids buying off of him in the playground. I myself bought 100 for $2, and the games were so fun, and you could actually buy the prizes. Not only that, you could use Starbucks for buying snacks at a snack bar that had candy and Rice Krispies. Too bad they didn't have chips. Back when having air gauges were all the rage, we figured out you could make them very easily from modeling putty. The modeling putty was very cheap to buy. You could make them however you desired. We bought the putty for $5 each, and once finished we could sell the block for close to $100 each. We had a lucrative ring going on which grew into somewhat of an enterprise between schools in my city. Once people caught on that the trend had phased out, dragons were the hardest to make, but we could sell them for $20 each. Also before smartphones, a guy in school figured out that by changing a couple settings you could get unlimited data on your phones, mostly for browsing blurry 10-second videos of bad porn. He used to charge $10 a phone and managed to do this to the entire school of 1,500 students. He pissed it all away though. Lol. Point. Also my school had a strict uniform which didn't allow long hair. Boys' school, so bobby pins were a hot commodity during uniform inspection to hide the rat tails. All the money was then spent in a little poker ring we had going on after school. The amount of money that changed hands was incredible. Managed to have a good win one afternoon and could afford to go away for the weekend with my then girlfriend. We thought we were ballers, eating at cheap chain restaurants with laminated menus and staying in gross motel rooms. We all left school and it all kind of stopped. In my country, around 4 to 5 years ago, there was a huge fad about these football stickers. Basically, they were little stickers of famous football players that you would stick into an album, and if you managed to collect all of them, you'd receive a big reward. I don't remember what it was, but it was enough for the kids to go crazy over it. The way they worked is, you'd buy a sticker pack, and each pack had around 3 to 4 stickers. Now, you'd probably get duplicates pretty often from this, and kids across the country found an interesting solution. There was a game they'd call gambling. So how gambling worked is, you'd lay down your sticker on the floor and then hit the floor with the palms of your hands, so they'd flip over. I don't remember the details, but any card that would land face down goes into your opponent's hand, and every card that lands facing upward stays with you. Point. Instead of gambling, some kids would straight up buy as many cards as possible and sell them at inflated prices. These were usually sold during school, so people could stock up on duplicates without having to go to stores before doing gambling sessions. It came to a point everyone in my class was doing this. Everyone. The sound of kids slamming the ground with their palms would get so loud I had to get out of the classroom and go elsewhere at times because I found it so annoying. If you haven't figured by now, I wasn't too interested in this stuff. Some kids would trade really rare cards. There were golden cards that featured the most famous players, and if you owned one you were one of the cool kids and would spend their entire savings just to buy sticker packs. I never understood this, but it was so fascinating to see kids develop so many rules to this game. This fad comes back every time these stickers are released, since they are released every time the World Cup begins, but I barely hear about it nowadays. The fad lasted for nearly a year and the company that made the cards actually started printing no gambling onto sticker packs. There were several news reports on that, just so you know. TLDR. Friend and I made a candy that made people puke. Not my kids, as I'm still in school, but instead me. My friend and I would make different candies using sugar, black pepper, and Kool-Aid mix. We made several different flavors. Some delicious, some disgusting. We would sell it by the sandwich bag. Probably $5 or $10 a bag. And it was ridiculously cheap to make. Almost 200% profit. We had to start selling it by smaller bags as the deals were getting suspicious. We started selling them in bags about the size of a dime bag. We got in trouble once. The police were involved because they thought that 2 middle schoolers had managed to get the entire 7th and 8th grade class addicted to some sort of new super drug, but they all laughed when they learned it was candy. There was this one kid, we will call him Anthony, who every day would take dares at lunch and do things to his food then eat it. Kind of like the movie Food Boy. One day me and my friend watched in on his little act, and he dared us to make him a candy that could make him puke. And we did. We used salt instead of sugar, and a mixture of taco mix, garlic and onion salt, gravy mix, black pepper, and 2 sprays of liquid as. We brought it to school, and on the playground that day he licked his finger, shoved it in the bag, then continued to shove that finger in his mouth. About 2 seconds later, he vomited. For a whole minute. It was disgusting. He dropped the bag into his vomit, and the smell spread. People gagging for about 20 feet around us. Then the teachers came. Me and my friend left. But they knew it was us. Detention for a week. It was a sad day for us. Late to the party, but whatever. In middle school I sold Airheads for 25 cents a piece. Standard fare. Carried the box around in my book bag and sold throughout the day. Did it for about a month and made some good coin. I eventually stopped, but my classmate was interested in picking up the business of selling candy. Told him where to go to buy bulk candy, BJ's Wholesale or Costco, and you're set. He picked up where I left off and he expanded a lot. This dude sold not only Airheads, but every other candy imaginable. Pixie sticks, blow pops, etc. I have no idea where or how he carried his schoolwork, because his book bag was filled to the brim with candy. But needless to say, business was really good for him. Everyone in our school knew him as the kid who sold candy, and he became semi-famous in our school for it. He had a really good run, until a couple months later, school administration caught up to him and told him he had to stop his in-school entrepreneurship. We eventually moved on to high school, weren't really close or hung out a lot, but were friends nonetheless. Whenever we crossed paths, he'd always tell me how I was the one who inspired him to sell candy in middle school, and always thanked me for showing him how. I actually started one point. I ran a gambling operation in junior high. It started out with playing speed. I was great at it and kept getting challenged, but got bored of playing and finally had people bet money in order to play me. That got really popular, so I ran some tournaments in the cafeteria for cash. Eventually people wanted more, so I started setting up poker games, blackjack, dominoes, dice games, and other stuff. Now keep in mind we're only in junior high in a small town, so there wasn't big money going around, and most of the kids didn't actually know how to play any of the stuff they were gambling on. I stopped playing and started renting out deck of cards, dice, dominoes, etc. to people, which was good easy money. People would approach me to find or organize a game for them, and I would talk to some teachers to let us use their classrooms after school. We had a bunch of people bet on Beyblade matches, so I bought one of those stadiums to rent out to them and got my money back. Never was a bookie though, too dumb to figure out how it worked. There was also the time in junior high when I sold adult manga to classmates at a big markup. Our local bookstore didn't know that the manga had sexual scenes in it, so they never bothered to check for IDs, but always restocked them, so I made some decent cash until they finally realized what was up. TLDR, kid starts a non-violent gang war over sweets. Okay, so I'm still in school as of the time I'm writing this. I go to a private school in Scotland. Usually the teachers would know about anything shady going around the school. So one day this kid who I'm friends with brings in sweets. We are allowed food in our school and gave some to people, me included. Loads of people who start asking the kid for sweets. So the next day he comes into school with masses of sugary treats. Many people asked him for some, but he always said £0.75. The packets of sweets he bought were about £1 each. Then he tries to sell individual ones for nearly the price of a whole pack. Somehow people started buying them off him. He would hide them in his locker and eventually got more people to help him run his black market. I'm also pretty sure he started trying to sell fake Supreme stickers too. Word spread about his business around school and more people tried imitating him. We had pretty much rival drug gangs, but with sweets. Soon enough the gangs of kids would send messages to each other about how they were going to beat each other up, but there was no fights, just messages and long cold stares. The businesses have winded down a bit because people just started bringing their own food, and now it's only a matter of time before everyone forgets about the black market. A guy I knew in high school sold candy. That's pretty common, but this kid ran a tight ship. He'd make about $50 to $100 a day depending on how good business was. I'm not sure how much of it was profit though. He would buy in bulk and buy bags of French bread. He didn't have the best family life, so he would eat that for lunch and would stuff the bag full of candy at the store so he could get free candy to flip for 100% profit. Everyone knew he had candy, and he even made a small menu at one point. At the beginning of each year he would pay somebody in cash to switch lockers in case his locker ever got searched. We couldn't sell anything on campus, so he had to be sneaky. He also sold weed and occasionally ecstasy. Periodically he'd get ratted out, and campus security would come into our class to get him. He would quickly throw his bag under someone else's desk and hand them a few pieces of candy on the house to switch bags. He was also super lazy in school, so would give people free candy, presumably the stuff he got for free in the French bread bags, to do his homework for him. He rarely had to do his own work. This was a huge, school-wide operation in a school of about 2,000 students. Everyone knew he had candy. No matter what grade level or group you ran with, he ended up getting expelled for selling drugs on campus, but he was pretty shrewd businessman and quite successful while it lasted. We always joked that he'd either go to prison or end up on Wall Street. I took part in several, but I'll name the most notable ones. Living in Canada, we had harsh winters and warm summers, and had a market corresponding to each. In the summertime, we dug pits in the ground and began gambling marbles, as we'd play against each other whilst wagering the marbles we played with. We established base values for each size of marble and determined the rarest varieties, much like a collector's union. This went on for years. We'd bet marbles against each other and bargained often. Now, here comes the catch. For kids whose parents worked after school and didn't take the bus, there were several dozen of us. We would go to an after-school club where we could play games and do our homework. To be eligible to play, you had to trade in some marbles, which you earned from doing schoolwork. As we gambled during school hours, we would never be doing homework. Eventually, the school banned gambling altogether, much to our disappointment. The second market took place in the winter time. It's important to keep in mind that we were a large group, aged 7 to 11, so we didn't know much about ethics and such. Every time a cold spell hit, students would flock to the school in search of quality ice. For some reason, everyone had determined that ice was to be used as "playground money," which we would trade for marbles and better ice. It was a real racket. The largest and sturdiest pieces were highly prized, which could be amassed easily if you came early. You could also trade a big piece for many smaller pieces. The grades had organized themselves into pawn shops, where a team of 3 to 4 would take shifts in selling ice. The older kids usually got the best quality. As far as I know, they still haven't banned it, but I left the school in the 4th grade, so I don't know the current situation. This is gonna get buried, but I always wanted to share this story. In the elementary school in my town, every Wednesday we would get to order cottage workshop subs. Living in rural Canada, we were an hour to the closest fast food restaurant, so there was only pub food, and there were the cottage workshop pizza subs. Fresh baked white roll style buns about the size of your 2 hands squeezed together, made into probably the most delicious thing you could find for an hour drive in any direction. Easily the highlight of my school week. Anyway, cut ahead to high school, and there's now a school cafeteria. They didn't like people bringing in cottage workshop subs because nobody would order food on Wednesdays. Anyway, of course my friends and I decided to pick a table by the window, and one of our mothers would deliver us subs through that window, just to make a big show of it, and get some attention for a laugh. Well, the next week people were starting to our orders into us for the subs, and it began to grow. It was a lot like a less dramatized version of the Community episode with Share Chicken Fingers. We started getting top dollar to order these subs. We had people saving our table on Wednesdays at first, but soon the whole week we'd come into the cafeteria and people were getting up from the table and walking away while we approached, and people started offering top dollar to get one. Started getting invited to the cool parties, and for a group of stupid guys who thought having subs delivered through a window was funny, we kinda became popular. It came to a head eventually when the poor lady who had operated this cafeteria independently had to close because she was working barely on a profit before we came in, and she had to sell out to a chain restaurant that serves microwaved food instead of real home cooked meals. The orders died down pretty quick because everyone felt so bad, and we skipped back into our comfortable obscurity from there. The table stayed ours till we graduated high school as a sort of consolation prize for what we did, but we kinda ruined a poor lady's life, so yeah. TLDR, made homemade booze and sold it in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia at the international school point. I was an expat kid in Riyadh in the late 80s and early 90s. One thing my dad used to do back in the day was make homemade wine from the Roche grape juice, water, sugar and brewer's yeast. We made it in 5-gallon jerry cans with homemade carboys. Well, when I started hitting my mid-teens it occurred to me I could do the same thing for me and my friends and throw some really crazy compound parties and make some side money. So me and my friends at the time went and bought the materials, put it together, and then stole some brewer's yeast from my dad's collection. We set up our homemade wine contraption in an abandoned mechanical building on the compound and waited the required 30 days for the yeast to do its thing. Now, since we didn't have good filtration equipment, the wine continued to ferment in the flip-top bottles after we bottled everything, and the yeast we used was 22%, so these carbonated grape juice wines were pushing insane levels of carbon and alcohol. Like demented little dealers, we threw an intro pay for a group of us at my compound and proceeded to get like 50 mid-teens blackout drunk. If we would have been caught, we would have received like 20 lashes at Chop Chop Square and then deported. Thankfully we had someone watching over our shoulders and didn't get caught. From that point on we would bring 2 bottles to school and sell them for like 100 reals a bottle, which is like 20 bucks. We would then throw blatant drinking parties with the friends we sold it to. To this day I still don't understand how the Mutor didn't catch us, religious police, and how all of our friends' parents never ratted us out when they would come home stinking drink. Good times, man. Hockey cards. This was around the time that our country, Czech Republic, won the ice hockey tourney at 1998 Olympics and then 3 world championships in a row, so hockey was at the height of its popularity in our country, and that's in addition to always being the most successful sport for our countries. We used to have power rankings of hockey cards. Normal players that we didn't know were the baseline cost, worth 1 goal is I think 3 to 5. Czech players or popular foreign NHL players like 2 to 50, depending on how popular they were. Jager or Hasek were worth the most. And then there was a special brand of cards, can't remember the name, that had like a solid metallic foil background and usually a very famous player on it, and those were also worth like 10 to 50 times more than normal cards. They had 3 types that we counted as different tiers. Blue background was the lowest, green higher and red the highest. Now, we were obviously trading them between ourselves, but nobody really cared about having like entire teams or stuff like that, rather having the most cards and the most expensive ones, so we spent like grades 2 to 4 gambling for them. There were 2 games that we were playing. First was a dice game. I don't know if it has any name in English, but in Czech it was, as I later found out, called Mezi Kozy. Between ticks everyone would bet a certain amount of cards into bank, then we'd switch turn rolling. You'd roll 3 dice, you could then pick 2 of them, bet a certain amount of cards and roll the remaining die, and if you rolled a number between the first 2, you'd take the amount of cards you bet from the top of bank, otherwise you had to add to the bank. Rolling a triple would win you the whole bank. Since it was always no limit, this could quickly get pretty crazy if one or more players always bet the entire bank and had to double it on losing. The other game was much more about skill though. You'd play this on the school desk. Both players would be on one side and would slide their card as far as possible without it falling down. Whoever was farther won both cards. So, it was selling Rubik's Cubes, lube jobs, everything about cubing. It started off with a kid in my class, and he brought a Rubik's Cube, like the slow one, and I hated that guy. I mean despise him. In response, me and my brother decided to learn how to do cubing, to show off to that guy, because at school he would flaunt that he's the only cuber. I learned how to solve the cube much faster than my brother. I memorized the algorithms flawlessly, but I was slow at them. A month later my brother starts putting in serious effort into solving it and gets extremely fast in beginner's method first and then moves on to CFOP. Also, we rush to ask our dad for speed cubes. It goes on to eventually asking our dad every day for a new one. We had at least 19 and he's mastered CFOP, and at school he would sell his old cubes for money. Eventually my brother became the cubing whiz because he was much more efficient than the guy that first brought the idea of cubing in, and he was much kinder than him. It was pretty successful. People would ask him every day for a cube cleansing, lube job, an offer for a cube, and the prices were pretty decent, or even maybe over the top, at least in my standards. Lube job, $5 cube cleansing, $10 new cube, depends on how good the cube is. Angstroms and the Valk 3 were off limits. Varied from $10 to $30. I owned a couple, but my brother would use them much more often than me. It was pretty cool, haha. Our grade 4 teacher had set up a system called Funny Money to teach us how money works. Well, how it worked was that she would give us each a certain amount of allowance a week and we can get more for being a good student or doing volunteer work. We could spend the money on washroom and drinking fountain tickets or at a weekly auction. Us kids would bring in items to sell at an auction to make more money. The problem with this system was that in an auction you might not make as much money as you want to, and you need to wait weeks before your item could be sold. So us kids realized that if we forget the middleman, our teacher, we can just make more money and we can make it faster. This turned really bad. Kids were ruthless. If you wanted to borrow an eraser or a pencil you'd have to pay them with your money. Black market business such as pencil renting. My friend was in this business and could he catch a salesman? I used to sell these after class. It was hard life because if you didn't have money you couldn't get anything or use the washroom. After a while our teacher found out about our black markets. I think some kid bought a toy using their money and then wanted it back, but the consumer wouldn't give it back, so he told on them. After she found out she confiscated everyone's funny money and made us start over with only money in our bank now. She told us what black markets were and how they were illegal. She also made us return some black market items we bought. I had to give my friend his lead pencil back. I really wanted to keep it. I find it so funny that even us 8-year-olds went straight to the black market once we realized that the middleman is holding his back. I think it's a great social experiment that teaches us human nature. Drugs, weed and cigarettes. Don't know why you'd want cigarettes as you could just get them after school in any supermarket. There was this dude who looked like a faking zombie and obviously did a shit ton of drugs and sold all those to whoever wanted them. I heard stories of him smoking in class and shit. Once the two classes, each class had like 20 students, small school, were merged for chemistry class and he asked to go out, so he did. After like a minute I smelled cigarette and I instantly knew this idiot had went into the yard and started smoking right under the window. Pretty sure they didn't let the little shit in school next year or he decided to change schools himself. Private school 2. The other thing that suddenly got popular in school was Destiny. Don't know why, but as soon as some of the popular kids started playing, others bandwagoned in. So once I got matched against these kids and, surely enough, stomped them. Didn't make enemies or anything. I was on friendly terms with them. After that I did carries for people and did stuff for them like acquiring weapons. Eventually this new guy came into our school on the beginning of the year and I got him into playing Destiny. He became a god. He beated some of the best players and streamers. I'm still close friends with him to this day, and some of my best memories was playing Destiny with him. Oh, and those popular kids. Got into a drama with one of them, beated the shit out of him IRL, then proceeded to beat the shit out of him in game. He hasn't played PS4 for a long time, as I guess after the drama out of his game friends splitted, and with me roaming Destiny he stopped playing. Not a black market, but a good way to make some money. Game called Money Up. These were the rules. Take any wall, preferably in the playground, and draw an imaginary line parallel to the wall about 2 meters away from it. Every person that wanted to play would put into the game £1. This is in a UK school. Every player throws their coin towards the wall from the line. The aim, get the coin as close to the wall as possible to determine in what order you get to do the next part of the game. After everyone throws their coins, every person gets a turn to throw the pile of coins up while saying heads or tails in the order that was determined by how close they got to the wall point. When the coins landed on the floor with the side of your choice facing up, you keep them. The rest goes to another person, and this repeats until there are no coins left. Sometimes the coins wouldn't even get to the third or even the second person. Sometimes one coin would go around through the same people over and over again. Regarding the black market, people would buy, for example, family-sized Kit Kats, chocolate bars, from this super cheap store called Poundland. A pack costed something like £2 for about 6 bars, which gives about 33p per bar. They would sell it for 50p at school. Same with packs of junk food and drinks. True businessmen they were. I did my own thing, nothing on the scale of others here, but the ends justified the means. So I, like many, grew up somewhere between lower middle class to upper low class in a small little one-stoplight town where instead, if multiple schools per town, it was multiple towns per school. We had the K8 on our town, and the high school was about a half hour to 45 minutes or so away. Anyways, I was on the free lunch program, but my mom gave me $1 and a dime tax a few times a week when she would drive me instead of making me walk and bus to school. Worth noting that back then there were no options. You got your tray and only choice was white or chocolate milk, and that's only if you were paying for your food. We'd stop at the gas station and I could grab a couple things while she grabbed a smoke outside. I wasn't allowed sodas and never cared for them much back then anyways, but what I did like was an extra pizza at school on Wednesdays and a chocolate milk, neither of which was included in the free lunch. So what I would do is I get 4 cans of the $0.25 soda at the gas station, then refill it for $0.50 at school, where there were no vending machines back then. Thanks had enough for extra pizza for me and my friend plus chocolate milk for both of us every day by turning my $1 to $3 a week into $2 to $6 a week, and would even have money left over when we would have track and field days it would be on. There was no free lunch and everything was expensive, so I would get $5 each day for 2 to 3 days. We'd make our stop so I could get some snacks cheap and only have to buy a hot dog for lunch at the concession stands, while I'd go in and buy up a bunch of the cheap soda and a box or 2 of Little Debbie snack cakes and would sell it all for $0.50 to $1. I made serious bank and was eating Slim Jims, nachos, ice cream. The sky was the limit. Then there was the bartering. I could have an entire lunch bag for 1 soda. Those fruit by the foot and gushers made the whole thing worth it, since I never got those any other way as a kid. When I was in middle school there was an underground soda market. One notoriously delinquent kid ran the whole scheme. At my school the high school and middle school were in the same building. My town was small and rural, so we didn't have many stores nearby. So if your parents didn't buy soda, you really didn't have it. Anyways, delinquent kid and his friend had a system. DKF, delinquent kid's friend, lived right in the middle of the village, where our town's market was. About once a week, he would go to the store in the morning and buy a few liters of soda. Nothing fancy, usually Marksy, Dizzle, Mountain Dew. We just called it that, and either Pepsi or Coke. Delinquent kid would take the sodas and sneak them into the bathroom using his jacket with freakishly large inside pockets. These pockets were big enough to put multiple iPads in them, so sneaking in 2 liters wasn't unimaginable. He would hide them in the tiles in the ceiling. He would stand on the toilets and push up the tiles to grab or put back the bottles of soda. He would fill up 20-ounce bottles of soda and sell them for $1 a piece. The 2 liters only cost about $1 each, so he made profit off of selling just 2 bottles. I would usually offer him a $5 bill for soda and keep the rest on my tab, so I could go get up to 5 sodas. I'd usually get one after recess, during SSR, silent sustained reading, or after school point the teachers and staff never caught on. Nobody snitched on this scheme, and it stayed there until I graduated 8th grade and went on to the high school wing. Pogs and slammers. Like 4th or 5th grade, got a pog maker for some reason or another. Zman the animated series was a big hit at the time, so I would take magazine pages, trading cards, or even the back of the packages of Zman toys and use them to make new pogs out of the blanks I had. Kids would also request other designs like Barbie, Hot Wheels, G.I. Joe, Mario. I'd then load them up in the little 10, maybe 15, count packages and sell them for $5. Then there were the slammers. If you know Pog, you know the best slammers were the ones that were about 1/4 inches to 3/8 inches thick and made of metal. When I was young we moved into a really old house that had a bunch of leftover sheet from people living there through the years. Just so happened to stumble upon a box of random miscellaneous small metal parts. Rummaged through it and happened to find dozens of thin cut, metal, cylindrical discs, already made to the perfect dimensions. A little bit of sanding off rust and polish later, I made about $20 a piece for each one. No idea where these 9 and 10-year-olds get their money, but who am I to judge? This lasted for about 2.5 weeks until the other kids started fighting each other on the playground over it all. Someone would claim the other cheated for whatever reason, or claim the other kid stole something from them. Eventually the administration stepped in and banned pogs from school. Bummer. Money dried up quickly due to eating an extra slice of pizza and way too much ice cream at school during lunch almost every day. Had the money and definitely couldn't afford to let my parents know how I got it. I'd goostimate I cleared around $300. They'd want their cut. At that point someone would eventually come up with something new, only to be shut down a few days/weeks later. So on and so on. In high school, a friend of my dad's owned a liquor store. He'd let me buy booze on two conditions: 1, I wouldn't let my dad find out, and 2, I wouldn't tell anyone where I got it. I would pick up a bottle of Jagger for $10 and sell it for $25. I made bank. I was also invited to all the good parties because I always brought liquor. I had a constantly rotating stash of booze hidden in the trunk of an old Edsel on our property. I was also really good friends with basically our school's only dealer. Someone would hit me up on AIM or MSN, make an order for whatever booze/drugs they wanted, and I'd make a run on my old moped point. After like 2 years of this, I started getting paranoid after someone told me her friend got caught and talked. So I shut down operations, liquidated stock, and laid low. One day, a friend of mine walked up and asked if I could sell him some alcohol. I said no and acted dumb. He pressured me, then asked if I still kept it in the old car. Stupidly, I trusted him and told him I might be able to get him something. Cops were waiting for me at home, and I was put in hauled cuffs. They had a warrant by then, so my parents had to let them search the yard, including the car. Luckily I had already gotten rid of everything like a week prior, so they didn't find anything. I had never been in trouble like that before, and played dumb, so my parents believed me over the police. My dad suspected it though, because he caught me stealing his beer. When I was a little younger my buddy said that he got caught with some pot, so the resource officer made a deal. He'd forget the dimmer bag if he ratted me out. Illegal as shit, but no one really pressed the matter, and it went away. At first, I wondered why the fact there'd need to be a black market for anything of any kind. Then I remembered I'm just old. I forgot that things started getting stricter and stricter following my graduation from high school around 1998. I have a little brother who graduated from the same school in 2010. Before that, though, other than cigarettes and alcohol, all the stuff people are mentioning was pretty accessible in junior high and high school. Junior high had 4 vending machines in the main lobby, high school had 8 in the cafeteria lobby, and a few others spread throughout the school, and it wasn't an especially large school. Our computer lab was monitored by a mixture of librarians who were essentially clueless and students who weren't. We had all kinds of games and pirated software on all of them, including things like 3ds Maximum, Adobe products, brand new PC releases, and emulators, which were newer at the time, mostly Nesticle. We weren't really overly supervised in any regard at any point in the day. You could go home for one study hall out of the day and for lunch, but to a much more limited capacity in elementary and middle school, so a lot of us had guidance book and lunch with a study hall, and any other free period we could think of and just go home for 2 hours. Periods were 45 minutes. And you had the same schedule every day. You just had to not stop when the lot monitor tried to flag you down for your period pass. We'd usually go get food then go hang out at someone's house until 7th period. There wasn't a lot of space for black markets for other things. I've been made to consider religious schools and schools in other countries. It's still a bizarre concept to hear about. Candy. This kid a few grades above me would sell candy on the school bus, and boy did I get in trouble for it. I'd use one of my for lunch money dollars to buy some candy. I don't remember the prices, but it sure felt like I was getting a lot for a buck, whereas I'd get maybe one fruit pie at school. Then again, I was in 4th grade, so for a while, my parents were health nuts. We were raised veg/pescatarian and sugary products were a gigantic no-no. Sugary cereal was seen as a rare special treat, and only for dessert. Anyway, one day, somehow, they found a stash of candy in my backpack, and they were furious. I was grounded and lambasted for months. No more school bus. I had to point out the kid at school, which amounted to 0, because the kid wasn't doing anything illegal. No more snake, no video games. My room was essentially a box. My dad practically tore apart my backpack, insisting the back padding was actually another secret stash of candy I was hiding from him. Thing is, I was never even hiding it from them. They were just too self-involved to know what was going on in my life. My favorite part was when my dad screamed, "And you didn't even share with your sister? How selfish." To which I honestly replied, "I gave her plenty," which gave him the opening of, "How dare you involve your little sister in this?" Oh, did I fail to mention he's a lawyer? To this day, I'm still confused as to why they treated it like they found a brick of heroin, when they were way less upset with my sister when she got a DUI at 18 and lost her license. The things that make me go what the fuck at 4 AM. We had one real badass geometry teacher growing up. She was ex-military, I think. Drove a Holly. Homework every night. If you missed any questions on the homework, you had to correct them on top of doing the next night's homework. Needless to say, a lot of kids started to have to stay in her room after school redoing old assignments. She had every student's name on her chalkboard with tally marks next to her name for how many we each owed her. It was terrible. Next to my locker was a cool kid named Mark who played basketball with me. His mom was Japanese, and she would do all their homework with them and basically teach him, so he had 100% A+ homework grades, right? So I start asking Mark if I can copy off of his assignments. Now, Mark's no idiot. He sold his assignments for cash and back massages from some specific girls. I guess I was kind of like the bookie, a middleman who handled a lot of the transactions, and kids actually always copied my assignments and I would copy Mark's. We had like 20 some odd kids on our books either paying Mark cash, massage, chewing gum, and even video games, I think. Mark would just sit there, getting his back massaged by some girl off the swim team as he trains his Steelix. Dozen kids copying his homework around him. Good times. I was a legend at my school. They turned off the vending machines during school hours, so you couldn't get soda or candy. One day my best friend brought a 12-pack of Dr. Pepper at school and someone approached him and offered $5 for a can. Later me and my friend went to the store and stocked up on candy and soda. $1 a can, $2 for candy. Our profits were amazing. Earned $12 a 12-pack, it was insane. Everyone at school knew we were the guys to come to. Our demand became so big I had to bring a large suitcase to school, and that was a big mistake. A security guard approached me and asked what was in the bag, and I had to show her, and it was a couple 12 packs and candy. She knew someone was selling soda and candy at school and finally caught me. She was taking me to the principal's office. On the way there, the cool laid-back security guard stopped her and asked her to go check something, and he said he would take me. He took me aside and said, "Give me a Snickers, M&Ms, and a Sprite, and never do this again. Go hide the suitcase." This is one of my favorite school memories. TLDR, school didn't sell candy or sodas. Took upon myself to sell. Demand was high. Security caught me. Was being taken to principal. Was handed over to cool security guard. He took some snacks and let me go and told me to stop. Tended to sell off goodie bags of sweets, candy, biscuits, cookies, and also the parts of my lunch that I didn't enjoy. Every now and then I'd go to the Cadbury shop in Portsmouth and buy bulk packs of foam candy, shrimps, bulk chocolates, and those massive Cadbury's bars with my pocket money. Come back, and the night before school, I portion them up. A 2 kg box costing £10 of foam shrimpses would make about 25 bags of shrimps that I'd sell for £1 each. Sometimes I'd barter if they were offering say 50p and a can of Coke, but generally I'd get £25 selling the lot of them over a few days. Chocolates didn't well for as much. Generally I'd keep half of a 1 kg bar, £8.99, to myself, and then sell the other half to one guy for £5 and a favour, usually meaning that when we went to the shops and I didn't have enough, he'd spot me some cash for a meal deal. Ended up getting a bit too big for my britches when I portioned bags of Cookie Crisp cereal that resembled tiny cookies and tried to sell them as mini chocolate chip cookies, even denying that they were Cookie Crisp to unconvinced skeptics. Got in a bit of a competitive market when this store chain called Londis began selling sour gumballs. Packs of 5, with sour apple, lemon, orange, raspberry, and, I think, another sour apple in a thin plastic packet. Sold for something cheap like 30p. One of my friends tended to buy a bunch and then sell either a pack for 80p or individual gumballs for 20p. He made so much that he began branching out into Rainbow Dust and those cheap Panda Pop drinks, like 29p for lemonade/cherryade. I unintentionally began competing as I bought some for myself and sold them to someone who wanted some for 70p. People began coming to me to buy them cheaper, and so I began stocking up and underselling the gumballs. My friend noticed and cut his prices to 50p. I ended up going down to 30p, breaking even in an attempt to allure customers to my other products. I ended up giving up on gumballs pretty quickly as I couldn't be bothered going to the shops to pick up gumballs, only to break even on each one. Lastly, with my lunch, I was pretty picky. My stepmother tended to make easy sandwiches using Marmite spread or sandwich filling, which I always tended to retch at. Grateful that she decided to make them in the first place, but kind of annoyed that she rarely took me or my brother's preferences into account. On the days where I didn't feel like having a squashed Marmite and butter sandwich, I'd sell it to one of my friends who loved all these odd sandwiches. He'd pay 50p per sandwich and 30p for each multi-pack packet of crisps from my lunch. I'd only tend to sell the flavors I disliked anyway. Also sold these chocolate bars called Gold Bars to my best friend for like 40p, but because he was my BFF I often cut the price, agreed to some kind of swap, or even just gave it to him. All of this meant I had money to buy cooked lunches or food from the nearby BP garage. Favorite combo was an all-day breakfast baguette heated with HP sauce, ice cold bottle of Coke, and a packet of Flamin' Hot Monster Munch. We would a sports day every year at my high school at a separate stadium. Since we couldn't have lunch from the dining hall, we were given coupons that could be used in the stadium diner. But because they're not that smart/lazy, they didn't laminate the coupons. This meant once we were given the coupons the day of the event, we could photocopy the coupons and sell them on year 7s who haven't caught on yet. Obviously if you just print off 100 coupons then people would catch on, so there was a bit of a strategy to it. Firstly, we would get coupons the morning of the event, before we take the bus to the stadium. When you went to the photocopiers, Firstly, there is probably already people at them. And the fact that teachers would catch on if you spent the whole morning at the printers meant that kids made a route between printers. Then some teacher would search you before going into the stadium, so kids would do drug level of smuggling. Then people would either sell the coupons or use multiple while trying not to get. They don't get that suspicious if you use 2 or 3, since you could have just bought coupons of your friends. But when you get to 6, then you raise eyebrows, so you sell. Perhaps a little late to the party, but as a kid, I went to an uppity private school. Super conservative, super strict, all those things that kids love. They did have a boss lunch program, though. Anyways, one of the rules completely prohibited trading cards of any kind. We weren't allowed to have them in our backpacks. We weren't allowed to have them in our lockers. We weren't allowed to have them on school property of any kind. So you take all of these preteen kids and tell them no Yu-Gi-Oh, no Pokemon, no magic, and you have a recipe for some really creative ideas. Well, as it happens, I had a shirt that had a zipper on the sleeve. It looked decorative, and in fact the other side was decorative. But the one side, my left arm, was an actual functioning perfectly trading card size pocket. I could fit a stack of something like 20 cards in the pocket, at least without it looking really obvious and suspicious. So I would charge kids a quarter to stash their trading cards in my sleeve. On bathroom breaks, I would hand them out so that people could trade, play, or show them off. I was making a couple dollars a day, easy. The evil, or genius depending on how you look at it, part was that at the end of the bathroom break, I would charge people another dime each to store the card on the way back out. I always say something like, you paid a quarter for me to get it to school. If you want me to keep it safe for the last piece of the day, I need another dime. So, yeah, on a good day, I could make $7 a day smuggling trading cards for all the other elementary school kids in my neighborhood, which, considering I made $20 a month in allowance, I felt like a freaking millionaire. And of course, I blew all that money on special lunch snacks for myself and my friends, and that too, friends, is the story of my brief descent into a life of crime. I used to sell breakup services in high school. It was $4 per letter, up to 1.5 pages, and $0.50 a page after that. Surprisingly, this was my biggest seller even after breakup texts became a thing. Lots of people out there with lots to say, but a finite vocabulary that doesn't help them get it all off their chest. A personally relayed breakup message was $5 and a pack of gum, because I usually had a prior acquaintance with the receiver of said message, and it was always awkward. A breakup text/FB message was $3 for the initial message and $0.25 for every additional message the purchaser asked me to send. These were always done with the buyer next to me, so nothing was sent without them agreeing to it first. After a pretty successful few months, I branched out into doing people's school assignments for $10 to $20 a pop, and made enough in 1 year to buy a plane ticket to see my dad in the northern part of the US, and have spending money both there and when I flew to Germany for the holidays. This was also how I put gas in my car throughout high school. Honestly, doing assignments for other people was one of my favorite things to do, and it helped that it was such a high monetary yield for such a low effort input. I didn't ever end up being caught selling assignments and just kind of phased out of it after graduation. So yeah, that was the black market of my school. Breakup letters and book reports. My elementary school had a whole hidden area for our black market, which I discovered. See, most of our classrooms were in portables. Each portable had a small segment of fence between the ones next to it on each side. The ones on the end had fences wrapping around. One day, I was walking from class to the playground during first recess when I noticed a large hole in one of the fence segments. It was very easy for my little second grade self to slip through. Even the third graders could fit. I doubt the fourth graders could, but they and the 5th-6th graders had separate recesses on the other side of the fence with some bush or plant. Can't remember. This was a long time ago. That was easily passed through with little to no scratches. After going through the barrier, I came across a little courtyard with a small circular table. The rest was concrete ground space. Of course, I told my friends about it. We invited select people and formed a club we called the School Name Market. Our earliest meetings were discussions on modifying the secret area. We ended up making a tiny cardboard rim for the table so we could roll marbles on it without them falling off, and spending a recess stretching out the branches or whatever of the barrier so that minimal scratches were sustained. Then we let trusted people in and created a main selling point, middle marble. Basically archery but tossing marbles on a table. The incentive was betting and gambling. There was a list of items that you could throw in the center of the courtyard, and whoever won got all of them. Mechanical pencils, fancy marbles, those erasers that you can take apart, silly bands, etc. No money. At the end of every month, we crowned a champion who won a set of gold painted marbles. The rest of the market was trading and socializing. This continued for 3 months before the yard duties began to notice students not around at recess, and someone snitched. They forced us out, and one of the yard duties was going to punish the 15/16 of us, till another decided to make it a teaching point for us. Gambling is illegal for minors, as we were told, but we did a great job of organizing the mini society. There was order and everyone followed the rules. Take out the betting and gambling and do it in an unrestricted area and we could continue. Since the illegal part was the real incentive, middle marble dissolved from a major group activity into a small game that some played at recess. Screw you for snitching, Michela. I was in elementary school while one of my older sisters was in high school. In our area, the French classes at the high school would sell full bonbons as a fundraiser. Thing was, I loved bonbons so much that I would bring them to school and eat them during class. My classmates and soon everyone in our grade were intrigued, so I cut them up into small pieces and sampled them out. They loved them so much that they all wanted to buy some. My sister ended up giving me majority of her bonbons to sell at my school. Since the demand was so high, it got to the point where I had all my bonbons on me at all times. After I saw a kid snooping around my desk searching for the French candy, I became the hustler kid from the recess cartoon. Deals were once made out in the open, but to secure my sales they were being conducted behind the portable classroom, out in the soccer field, in the restrooms, on the way to the library, you name it. I was on top of the world. After a while, the school caught on, and I was called to the principal's office saying I needed a permit to sell them, and blah blah blah, but I continued to sell them in secret, and made kids swear they didn't buy them from me, and that an older sibling or friend gave it to them. Unfortunately, school caught wind of it, and the whole operation got shut down when a kid was overheard whispering to another kid where he can still get bonbons. I was brought into the principal's office once again, and I was given an ultimatum: stop selling and help selling snacks, which was a fun job to be honest, or get detention for the rest of the week for disobeying. At our school, detention wasn't inside a classroom. Oh no. Detention was your butt planted at the lunch tables outside, while your friends were barred from interacting with you. They let me give my answer the next day. Fundraiser was ending soon, so that meant goodbye to my supply. I had made my decision. The next day, I was called into the office to give my answer. I chose detention. Haha. So there I was, but stuck to the lunch tables every day for the rest of the week, carelessly enjoying the rest of my bonbons. Erasers and ice cream sticks. Okay, it sounds weird, but hear me out. During my primary school, like in Malaysia, the kids made up a game with square erasers, which is to try and flip it over each other. Erasers costs about Rm 0.50 cents, probably 20 US cents, and we would usually color them to our style and all that. From that, the entire school actually made a rule system for a game that is, if you win by having the eraser land on top of the opponent's eraser, you will get to keep the eraser as your prize. The rule goes the same with the ice cream sticks. However, we would usually cup our hands and try to puff air by hitting the table and having the air to push the sticks up and land onto the opponent's stick or sticks. The school caught on about this and decided to ban this activity since it's seen as gambling. So all erasers has been confiscated, and we are only allowed to use the erasers on the pencils. The pencil eraser quality is so bad, it rips the paper instead. Not only that, a few months later they said no board/paper game is allowed to be brought to school, since it's also seen as gambling, excluding board games. provided by the school, which is stupid as fuck anyways, since the board game they provided us is basically confiscated board games from other students and this one history focused board game that requires knowledge 5 to 10 years ahead of our time, and since we were like 7 to 12 years old in primary school, it's retarded. Seriously, no chess or checkers allowed. Point at it. Adding some stuff to this. Drugs, yeah, mostly drugs. I didn't do any hard drugs and only smoked weed from 15-year-old onwards, but the skaters in my high school did any type of drugs. Pills, MDMA, ketamine. They sniffed or swallowed any type of drug they could find. I was super high in class now, and my math teacher noticed, and he was like, so weed is what's in now? A few years back they would crush pills and put them up their nose on that bench there, pointing at the wooden bench in the middle of your schoolyard. Also once talked about how I was a bit too high in class, smoked with 2 girls. I had a crush on one of them, and the other one supplied the weed that she had stolen from her mom. Anyway, I didn't realize the biology teacher was in class, so he came up to point me and said, you might think it's cool to smoke too much weed now, but when you eventually start doing pills it won't be that cool anymore to take too much. I told him I'd never do pills, and I never did. While I'm at it, I once made this super sweet and friendly girl next to me cry. I was super high and got a laugh kick and I just couldn't stop laughing. I was so high her nose looked kinda big, which was super funny to me. So I'd stare at her and laugh my faking ass off till she cried, and then I apologized to her dozens of times and explained to her I was high, and she stopped crying and thought it was pretty funny. I also found out that day that the prettiest girl in class, arguably the school, had a that smoked weed daily after she told me about it because I was high. We'd always get into arguments about the word cancer, which I used to curse, pretty normal Dutch curse word, and this would set her off. So months later I found out her dad had cancer, which also explains why this post-rich dude would get high every day. Lastly, one day a junior came up to me and a friend and asked if he could buy some weed. We didn't sell any, but my friend said sure. He put some tobacco and some random leaves and sheet from schoolyard trees in a bag and sold them to the kid. Next day the kid came by and was like, hey, mad, that weed was kinda strange. Like we got super high, but it tasted weird and the high didn't last long. Do you have any different weed for sale? We burst out laughing at it. Don't smoke weed, kids. Don't believe the faking hype. Take it from someone that was a stoner for over a decade. It started with silly bands. They got banned at the end of 5th grade, so luckily we were in a new school the next year for 6th grade. The trend died early on in 6th grade, and loom bracelets quickly followed. My sister and cousins were faking amazing at making these things, and could make them quick as hell. I would buy the materials, and give them each $1 for every 20 they made. They could probably make 30 an hour each. I would sell the really basic ones for $1 each, and the more complex ones for $5. There was even a really awesome one that took me hours to make. If you remember these things, the basic bracelet was the fishtail, and it looks just like the heado. It was 4 interlaced fishtail bracelets with the 2-side ones slightly higher up to form a U shape. Then it had XL bands running across the gap making a ladder shape, with a different color fishtail running through the middle under the ladder. The first time I made it, someone offered me $12 and someone then offered $13. PR Plen kept bidding until it sold for $21. When I became better at making those, I would make them out of the school colors and sell them to the sports teams and cheerleaders for $10. I made hundreds of dollars. GTA V came out a few weeks later, and I bought it with the money from my bracelet sales. I even would start buying M-rated games for people whose parents wouldn't buy it for them. $10 plus cost of game. My older brother was the one who would actually buy the games. He worked at GameStop, so it was easy for him. By 8th grade I was selling everything. Gum, candy, soda, bagels, HW answers, old essays, even sneakers. And I would also take people's T-84s home and put games on it for them. In elementary it started with Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Pokemon cards were somewhat valuable, but Yu-Gi-Oh cards were full on status symbol and currency. Some people traded cards for cards, others for money. A kid in my class traded me his PSP for the Winged Dragon of Rap. I enjoyed the few hours I had with that thing until his mom called our house in a fit and we had to reverse the trade. To be fair, it was his idea, but I certainly didn't turn him down either. At some point too many rare trades were happening and kids started giving up actual money that the school banned them. Didn't stop us from bringing them to show off or have secret trades. Eventually the hype kinda wore off and it shifted when Pokemon games gained traction and had the ability to trade and battle. Then it basically became who had the best Pokemon, sneaking our Gamma Boys, DS, and then DS Lights into school to do battle or trade, and who had made the most progress. There was also a fiasco with the Gamma Shark and Action Replay being passed around to hack the games and get some ridiculous cheat. It worked for most, also faked up some people's games. Still, that didn't stop the kids that owned them from charging others to use them. Point in terms of more ridiculous items, sticky tack was a big thing. It wasn't so much as a market, but rather bragging rights for whomever stole the most and got away with it. There were different tiers of quality and people traded various supplies for some. A highly prized mechanical pencil could fetch you a decent amount of tack. Then middle school and high school came around, and it was mainly centered on bribing people for homework answers. Certain people who had a grip on that market because they did their homework and were willing to share. They asked for more if you wanted priority in getting answers. Not a kids were bought or handed down from a perclassman, which was a godsend for me personally. Interestingly, there were a few students who stole a bunch of iPods and tried to sell them, and of course they got busted and expelled. They pulled off a decent heist though. Our school, we weren't allowed to leave at lunchtime. More for the safety of the neighborhood than our own. Point, the school dinners were terrible, unless you just a plate of chips, fries for the uncultured. So usually 15 minutes before lunch the texts would go through to those of us that had phones to each class, asking what the order was. We had a full-on squad including backups and apprentices yearning to belong, ready to do the run to the butty shop. We are talking big greasy bombs with bacon, egg, sausage, all the usual heart-stopping stuff, dirt cheap. This wasn't a cakewalk. Teachers always stood at the gates and also occasionally patrolled the streets themselves, especially if there had been any trouble, vandalism, fighting, suicide, that week. Getting caught at best meant we got our money back, at worst our butties would be thrown away. No lunch if that's all you could scrap together. Truly it was tragic if they got caught, and well-performing celebrity smugglers that weren't caught would take the more popular kids' orders. Other kids might have to try out a newbie or a smuggler that got caught recently. The fascinating thing was how it evolved organically. A couple of trailblazers realized they could jump the fence at certain unwatched areas. They had the glorious butties and told their daring tale to other kids. Those kids slipped them money to grab them a sandwich, and when they sat there in a classroom playing cards and a kid shows up, drops a delicious sandwich on the table and walks away, all the others are gobsmacked. How did you manage that? A few years of this evolved into ordering, money lending and favors, favorite smugglers, an ever-evolving game of cat and mouse with the teachers, etc. We brought on younger kids, who I'm assuming brought on their own apprentices who did get a cut of the spoils. Just the infamy point, prices were never really gouging, generally enough that everyone in the enterprise got a free lunch. At its height, at least when I was there, 3 to 5 kids would be making the run with about 8 sandwiches delivered each. We'd have the orders called in and often the butty would be delivered faster than if you stood in line at the school lunch counter. Other kids would try and compete, but they never touched our organization skills. They didn't call ahead with the orders. They got caught more often. They didn't have the couple of rich kids often willing to chip in a quid or two when a friend was short. If anything, these freelancers picked up the slack of kids we didn't trust enough to be part of our operation, so they never competed at all. Point, all in all it was good fun, sitting at a table playing cards, when a frantic kid calls saying he's seen someone get caught, having to route the others to pick up the extra sandwiches, making sure the caught kid got someone's packed lunch as a booby prize, etc. Then getting back to the card game, which other players TSK and say what a shame. That guy had potential, tall, a quick fence jumper and good on the more technical escape routes, but we all mentally add a black mark against his name, half because of his failure and half because he'll be in the teacher's sights for a few weeks now. Point in writing it out. We had a Mayfair-lite organization running food in a prison-like school system. I'm sure I've romanticized a lot of this, but it's very close to the truth, believe me. And all a good time looking back. Pokemon cards. Back in elementary in the early 2000s, Pokemon was at its global heights. The movies, the games, the merch, and of course, the cards. At school, everyone from first graders to 8th graders, and even the high schoolers next door, were crazy about the trading. And not even playing the card game, just the trading. Point. Cue my intro, a fairly inconspicuous middle schooler who didn't have access to all the packs and booster sets that all the other kids had, because I was one of the poorer kids. Even though I was able to go to a fairly pricey private school, my parents sacrificed a lot for our education. And that meant there wasn't much money to go around for any extra luxuries, such as Pokemon cards. We live in an island nation, where everything is imported, so anything apart from certain food items come at a premium. I managed to collect a few basic cards. Cards that kids didn't want, like energy cards, trainers, and some basic Pokemon, circles and diamonds. I would take my slowly growing collection to the little kids, grades 1 and 2, and trade with them by selling the idea of my quantity for your one card that I really like. And so from a quantity of fairly worthless cards, I was able to trade up for a few star cards and even some holographics. I slowly built up a collection that was half decent. I had maybe 1 or 2 prized cards. One of them being a Hitmonlee. Not ultra rare, but a respectable card. An older kid saw me with the card one day and he asked me where I got it from. I told him I had traded for it and that I was building a rock/fighting collection. I wanted to get a Machamp and Hitmonchan among others to complete my collection. Dude was like, hey, I'm trying to do that too, but probably only because I had just said that and it sounded like a cool idea. And then he's like, what if I bought your Hitmonlee off you? I can give you $15. I had to rub my ears to see if I heard him correctly. Just jokes, I didn't do that. I agreed right away. The kid was from a rich old money family here, and the money was nothing to him. For me, on the other hand, I was lucky if I got any pocket money at all. So on that day, my career in hustling Pokemon cards was born. This practice of going to kids with certain strategies, like my quantity for your one card, worked and worked and worked. I was making coin. I had many customers, some of which would go so far as to actually commission me to go find certain cards. This happened at a premium, but my private school clientele were more than happy to accommodate my charges, and I always delivered. Always I was raking in the cash. 12-year-old me was buying toys for myself that I could never afford. My parents were asking me where I was getting the money. I was just telling them I'm doing some chores and stuff for kids at school, and they were cool with that. They didn't think to even question my innocence one bit. Then one day we started seeing these dark cards come through. The Team Rocket Pokemon. I landed a relatively rare card, a holographic Dark Dug Trio, and sold it for $40 to that original customer, my first ever buyer. By now the dude had maybe thrown like $200-300 at me just for the cards, and, unknown to me, his parents were starting to wonder where all this money he was taking to school was going. So we made the trade on a Friday. The dude picked up the Dark Dug Trio, and I took my money. I had a great weekend, spending said money on a Saturday afternoon movie or something. I can't remember. Monday comes around, and we are back at school again. It's recess. The dude comes up to me with a really sheepish look on his face, and he presents the Dark Dug Trio to me. I was like, what's this for, bro? And he said to me that I had to give the money back and to take the card back, that his parents had told him to do this. They were also telling him that this had to happen for each and every transaction we had made. He didn't want to do this, and I could see he was pained by it, but his parents were not budging with it. It was so hard telling the guy, dude, I spent all the money. It's all gone. I told him there was nothing left. It was all gone. Needless to say, he was very upset and distraught. The next day our parents are called into the school, and my parents are given this very unexpected news of my behavior. I'm made to apologize to the kids I ripped off. I get suspended from school, and Pokemon cards are then banned from that point onwards at the school. My mom was really disappointed in me, but she knew how hard it was with our finances, so she wasn't actually too hard on me. My working class dad laughed it off and told me, don't worry about it, you and those kids will be fine. Just be careful about what you do next time. I thought they were pretty chill about it, but in hindsight I see that's because money was actually really tight and they saw me being out there for myself generating income rather than just asking for handouts. Lots of life lessons learned through that experience. It's something that is never going to leave me, and that was that. The rise and fall of the Pokemon card hustle. Other than the usual droll drug trade, my school had an interesting market during the era before school lunches were all cashless. Kids from low-income families would get free lunches, up to a certain cost, if they applied for it at the beginning of the year. This was verified through these differently colored, stamped, card tokens that were handed out to you when you went into the lunch hall. A different color would be used on each day, so you couldn't hoard these things, but the school didn't really care if you used a token you weren't really supposed to have, and you were free to leave the lunch hall with your token, even if you hadn't used it. This created a market where students who got free school lunches could trade their tokens with richer students for a lower value amount of real money or other goods. Richer students got a good deal and could save money if they preferred to eat in or were too young to leave the campus during lunch, whilst poorer students got actual money that they could spend off campus or save up over time. Point exchange rates remained pretty constant whilst I was there. The lunch haul value of each token was around 2.50, enough to buy you a main meal and a dessert or a drink or something. You could sell these tokens for anywhere between 0.50 or 1.50 depending on how fast you wanted to sell them. Pretty much anyone would buy at 0.50, some would buy at 1.00, and if you waited long enough, usually towards the end of the lunch period when supply would be lower, you would find some people who might be willing to buy at 1.50. My appetite was always kinda weak, so I made some good bank selling my token every day. Then there were the more enterprising students who would buy low sell high, often exchanging dozens of tickets per lunch period, netting them a tidy sum each day. I also had a small business selling homemade cocktails, but that's an entirely different story. Military boarding school. Point you have no idea. Point the base currency was ramen noodle packets. Extra food in the dorms was strictly forbidden to be kept overnight, and chow was pretty early, so you have all these teenagers with raging appetites and playing multiple sports not eating after 5 p.m. They get hungry. Having your parents send care packages usually resulted in someone a Full Metal Jacket scene where all your classmates suffer while you're forced to eat it, and then they beat the shit out of you later. Of course, upperclassmen would haze the shit out of freshman cadets for hiding food and then do the same thing themselves. Eventually you learned that if you kept them supplied they would look the other way. So stocking ramen and regularly bribing the next guy up just became a necessity for everyone. Point with ramen came those portable water heaters. Anything to make water boil. I once started a science club for the express purpose of getting access to the teaching lab supplies, where I was able to steal an unused hot plate and beaker that became my hall's clandestine ramen station. Everything else kinda went from there. Enough ramen could get you a pack of cigarettes, a bottle of cough syrup, to try to get drunk, or a whipped cream container for huffing. Once you were able to earn leave to go out on weekends, which usually meant being on the honor roll several semesters with no discipline actions, then your black market access really opened up. People would either go to the really sketchy area in town and bribe homeless, or rich kids would hire taxis and bribe the cab drivers to buy tobacco and alcohol. Entire weekends would be spent on unsuccessful convenience store runs. Since only a few honor roll students had leave at a given time, it was a bottleneck on the black market, and it ironically was probably the biggest drive for people keeping their grades up. Point bear in mind, nothing on the black market had any value based on its actual retail price. Actual cash transactions were rare, but sometimes I'd sell ramen for $3 or $4 each. Usually it was just more like 10 ramens for a cough syrup bottle, 50 for a bottle of malt liquor, etc. Point I had a tough time in my early years, but by the end of 10th grade I knew the system well enough to get a perclassman to leave me alone. Even get my back on a lot of things. I was always staying out of trouble and had high grades, so I became a major player in the black market because I could get basic stuff most people on the outside took for granted. Good razors, hair gel, Twinkies, creatine, protein bars, Playboys, beers, etc. Eventually I had a bigger stockpile of ramen than I could spend, so I just started stockpiling. And I had them all. Not just the ramen, but the raw women, and the raw children too. We had a project in secondary school about 2015 where we were given £5 each and was meant to then make a business. We all had to sign a slip and agree that if we didn't make money we'd give back the money ourselves. Essentially the school never made or lost anything. Now some people decided to try car wash or things like that. I went online, this was before Wish was as big as it was now, and ordered a load of laser pens at 20p each, and then some which were lasers with a pen built in. I sold the 20p ones at £1 and the pens at £2.50. I knew what would happen, and I was smart, and with every pen I sold I attached a slip removing all responsibly on my behalf, instructions what to do and not do. Now it didn't take long for people to start using these pens the wrong way and teachers weren't happy. At some point, someone in the class went to my bag and stole my money and pens, about £12 cash and £5 goods. Additionally, it all got traced back to me, and I had to hand in all the pens I had and tell my tutor who I had sold them to. I only said a couple of people. I also informed him of the theft and who it was, but nothing happened. Fortunately, I didn't have to pay back the school due to it. I was told I was going to have to receive isolation for the whole incident, but it never got followed up. So overall I made a little money and got away with it too. We weren't allowed to make lunch trades in elementary school. We did it anyway, but made sure the teachers weren't watching or that they were busy, sometimes sending a student to go distract them while we made the trade point. What ended up happening, however, was the eruption of a lucrative trade market for what seemed like our school kid version of gold point. My mother was very unhealthy in her dining habits. She still has a tendency to overeat and eat fast food way too often. But she also has a tendency to go on this unpredictable health kicks. And it was on one of these kicks that she bought me what would turn into my lunchroom gold. Baked Cheetos. Yes, my dear editors, baked Cheetos were first seen as an oddity. But after sharing one or two it soon became a hot commodity. I could buy anything with a bag of baked Cheetos. Gummies, candy, jello, pudding, other chips. Hell, I bought a whole sandwich on a good day. Point. Unfortunately, my lucrative trade empire was defeated by a single boy by the cursed name of Andrew. That's right, I remember. You see, Andrew had caught onto my game and soon started to bring his own variety of baked chips to the lunch trade market. He also had a tendency to always get a second pack of gummies by lunchtime and would use them to help sweeten the deal with his baked chips. This started a heated trade war as more members were involved, trying to compete in this new market. Point. Luckily, the teachers caught onto our black market before the war got too hot. By the end I had been one of at least 5 baked chip traders. As punishment, we were now personally monitored by the principal herself, and anyone who was caught trading would be punished by no recess and having to eat lunch the next day in the principal's office. A grim fate myself a few other traders would experience soon after. There were 2 school stores at my high school. They were a bit different and run by different teachers. One had school pride things, yeah, I know, supplies with the logo or mascot on it, some snacks and candy, but nothing to eat. The second exclusively sold food items, cup of noodle ramen, pastries, bagels, protein bars. Seems dumb to have 2 stores, right? Used to just be the first store was the only in the school. So unions or something meant that the school couldn't serve other food during lunch period. Since the store only sold light snacks, students didn't have much choice outside the cafeteria for those long days. When I was a student they had more than 6 floors in the one school, so it was easy to work up an appetite. Point. One student took it upon himself to start bringing food in and selling to his hungry classmates. I don't know how it started, it was before I was a student, but eventually this kid was buying and selling ramen, Oreos, pastries, lunches, you name it, from his locker. I imagine there were repercussions, but it eventually led to the opening of a second store in the school that only sold food, not during lunch hour, and students work there for class credits. I didn't appreciate it while I was a student, but I think it's nice that they at least opened an option after they realized that students were hungry and willing to pay. I wonder how different my experience would have been if that kid wasn't trying to make a buck.